Chapter 55. Chu Qingning widened his eyes and felt cold. He stared at Su Li's slightly raised lips. Although her appearance didn't change, he felt that the one standing in front of him was not a kind-hearted girl, but a capricious female devil. Illusion? Chu Qingning shook his head and looked at Su Li. She didn't smile anymore. It was an illusion. Without Su Li, the Su house became very harmonious. There were no more contradictions. Su Li was happy to live in the Baiwei building. It was more convenient for her to go to the Baiqiao Tang after dressing up. After Zhu Yan recovered, the room was full of tonics bought by Ma'am Su Chui, but she still felt uncomfortable. She tried hard to bribe the witch, but Su Li only changed a place to live, which made her very unwilling. It also made her clearly realize that if she couldn't separate Su Li from the Baiwei building, she couldn't drive Su Li out of the Su family. But Su Li used her cooking skills as a bond. It was impossible for Su Huanli to let Su Li leave the Baiwei building. This wicked girl. I have never seen her cook before. How could she be so good at cooking? Zhu Yan bit her lips with hatred. She was now on a dead end. Fortunately, Su Qingtan would come back in a year. She had enough time to come up with a solution. Time passed slowly when Su Li constantly improved her medical skills, and Fang Yuan and Chu Qingning built the yard in full swing. Nothing special happened for a whole month. Zhu Yan's belly was slightly bulging. She temporarily became the most important person in the Su family. Ma'am, Su Chui almost surrounded Zhu Yan every day. During this period, Su Li disguised as a man and made a transaction with Su Huanli at the Sana Bridge. This was the third transaction after she stole the seasoning. Except for the 90,000 taels spent on building the yard and purchasing a large amount of polished glutinous rice and other raw materials, there were 60,000 taels left. Qi Xianqing still didn't come back. Su Li didn't know which battlefield he went to, but the war was always long. It was impossible to end in a month. She estimated that Qi Xianqing would stay there for at least half a year. In my previous life, I suffered in the Su family and was blocked from news. I don't know which country to Han country is fighting with now. All kinds of thoughts flashed through Su Li's mind. The territory of the Han country was not small. It was bordered by 3 countries. The Qinghai province was located in the southernmost part of the Han country and adjacent to Nanjiang country. The Zhushou country was located in the northeast, and the Tianhe country was famous for its mechanism skills. Fang Yuan and Chu Qingning both fled from Nanjiang. It was reasonable to say that the Nanjiang country should be in chaos. However, the Desi town was not far from the border, but it was calm without any atmosphere of war. Therefore, Su Li speculated that the main battlefield was not here. Standing on the top floor of the Baiwei building overlooking the boundless night, Su Li sighed softly. In this busy and peaceful month, her cultivation had reached the complete foundation of Houtian Realm Level 9, and her aura was extremely smooth. She was just a step away from entering the Xiantian realm. If the technique was perfected, it would only be a matter of time before one reached Houtian Realm Level 9. However, if one wanted to cross the chasm and reach the innate realm, it would depend on one's aptitude. Some people with mediocre aptitude might not be able to break through in their entire lives. They would be stuck at the limit of their lifespan. With her aptitude, she would not be stuck at the limit. Even if she went astray in her previous life, she still stepped into the innate realm or even a higher realm. Unfortunately, the price she paid was too high. In the end, she was plotted against by Su Zipei and ended up in such a miserable situation. On the 7th day of Su Li's efforts to break through, Chu Qingning finally came to her. The yard was finally built. When she came to the valley, Su Li saw that the space of the valley had been expanded by 3 times. She couldn't help but praise him. She turned back and smiled. Thank you for your hard work. Have a good rest these days. When Chu Qingning heard the meaningful words, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. In the past month, he was tormented by the poisonous heart-biting insect. However, to his surprise, his cultivation had not regressed. Instead, it had made great progress, and his foundation was much more stable than before. This made him doubt Su Li's real intention, but he felt that it was impossible. After all, Su Li was not for Nanjiang. Even if she had heard of the poisonous heart-biting insect, it was impossible for her to know it better than him. At this moment, Suli had gone far and stood in front of the gate of the yard. It cost tens of thousands of taels of silver to build this yard. The materials used were all superior, which was more expensive than the Jinyuan court. The area was 5 times larger than that of the Jinyuan court, which was enough to accommodate 100 people. Sister Suli, Fong Ling ran over and hugged Suli at once. I chose the furniture in these rooms. Do you like it? Yes. Suli smiled gently. Since she moved to Suli's place, Fong Ling had kept up with nutrition. She grew a lot taller, and her skin became white. She looked mischievous, which was really lovable. Suli thought like this, but she didn't realize that she was only 15 years old now. Compared with Fong Ling, she was only 2 or 3 years older. Miss, you are here. Haydn and others swarmed from the yard. They worked very hard in the past month, but because they ate well, they all became strong, not as skinny and sallow as before. How about it? Although these boys haven't gone to school, they are very hard-working. Chu Qingning followed and said with a smile. Suli nodded slightly and said, Not bad, but far from my requirements. These days are free. You can pass on the practice methods of your Chu family and collect more things on the list. If they're collected, I will start to refine medicine to speed up their practice. Su Li's understatement shocked Chu Qingning so much that his eyes almost popped out. You can refine elixirs? Chu Qingning pointed at Su Li and said after a while, Aren't you a poison master? How can you refine elixirs? You are younger than me. Since ancient times, medicine and poison are inseparable. You talk too much. Su Li was a little impatient and said, Time is pressing. Pass on the practice methods quickly. The group of little beggars standing in the courtyard watched the two of them talk. They were all confused and had no idea what this conversation meant to them. Ling, teach them to read more in the future. Illiteracy is really a trouble. Su Li told Fong Ling again. This time, the little beggars understood and their eyes lit up. Could it be that they could also read and write like those officials? 1 month ago, they didn't even dare to think about such a good thing. After handing over the trifles, Su Li finally began to do business. She asked Haydn to take out a bag of polished glutinous rice and poured it into a basin to wash it. After soaking it for 2 hours, Fong Yuan came back from the Baiwei building and was shocked when he saw the scene. Was Su Li going to cook a new dish? Now almost everything in the Baiwei building was managed by Fong Yuan. Although shopkeeper Wu was still there, Su Li caught his secret of hiding money. In order not to be sent to the government office, he could only follow Su Li's order and pretend to help cover up the truth in the restaurant. After solving the problem of shopkeeper Wu, Su Li had already taken over the Baiwei building. However, Su Li didn't make false accounts and gave all the profits to the Su family, which made Fong Yuan very confused. What are you thinking about? Come and help me. At this time, Su Li's voice came. Fong Yuan immediately woke up and quickened his pace to run over. Su Li waved to Haydn and said, Go to your eldest brother to learn Kung Fu, in case you fall behind. Haydn now knew what Kung Fu was. He immediately nodded and ran away happily. Is Chu Qingning teaching Haydn and others the family practice method? That boy always abides by the rules of the family. Fong Yuan was surprised. Su Li glanced at him and said nothing. Fong Yuan was silent for a moment and held his breath. Yes, the Chu family was gone. Why did Chu Qingning keep it a secret? Did he want to die alone? Not to mention Chu Qingning. Even Fong Yuan was the same. I remember that the practice method of the Chu family is open to both men and women. Su Li, why don't you? Su Li was slightly stunned and immediately shook her head with a smile. Ling can learn it, but I don't. Fong Yuan frowned slightly and said, You don't want to learn it? Although the practice method of the Chu family is not the best, it is also an extremely rare second-grade practice method in the martial arts circle. If you learn it, you can reach the acquired first hurdle and protect yourself. Su Li still shook her head and didn't want to dwell on this topic too much. Fong Yuan knew that Su Li was extremely stubborn and could only sigh in his heart. He gave up the thought of persuading her and looked at the polished, glutinous rice in the water. You bought a whole warehouse of polished glutinous rice and a lot of distilling yeast. Are you going to make wine this time? It was not difficult for Feng Yuan to guess what Suli wanted to do from the things she bought before. But the wine on the market had already been saturated, and there were countless wineries. Even if Suli used the more expensive polished glutinous rice to make wine, it was only a little better than those wines. The cost was much higher than the gain. Why do you ask so much? Come and help me. Suli didn't answer. Feng Yuan was very helpless, but he was also used to Su Li's keeping him in suspense. He walked over and fished out the polished glutinous rice. According to Su Li's instructions, he poured it into the steamer with cloth and spread it evenly. Boom! The fire was burning in the hearth. As time went by, bursts of rice fragrance came out. About an hour later, Su Li asked Feng Yuan to stop. She took out all the polished glutinous rice to cool, added the distilling yeast, and stirred it evenly. Then she put it into a small jar and spread it flat with her hands. Soon there was no jar. Next, you and Qingning pay more attention to the wine jar. If there is wine, you can taste it. The taste of the wine can't be too sour. When it's sweet or sour, call me. Su Li instructed carefully. Feng Yuan firmly remembered and didn't dare to miss a word. Although the polished glutinous rice used this time was very little, it was still hundreds of taels of silver. He was not a wasteful person. After finishing the business of the wine jar, Su Li hurried to the Bai Chao Tang and began to see patients. Although it was a little later than usual, the waiting time was acceptable. Until midnight, the last patient left. Su Li stretched herself and looked at the dark night outside. She moved the door plank and was about to close the door and leave. Suddenly, the smell of blood assailed her nose. A resistance stopped her from closing the door. Su Li's pupils shrank slightly, and she looked down. Chapter 56. The night was as cold as water, and the smell of blood in the air was much stronger. Su Li looked at the figure lying on the ground with his head facing the ground. She didn't know whether he was dead or alive. She was never a good person. This person was seriously injured and dying, but he could still exert so much strength to stop her from closing the door. He was definitely not an ordinary person. If she got involved in it for no reason, it might be a big trouble. Thinking of this, she squatted down and opened the hand on the side of the door. She shook it off with disgust. When she was about to close the door, she glimpsed a crystal on the wrist of the former. This crystal immediately made Su Li tremble all over, and her face was no longer indifferent. Without saying a word, she carefully flipped the bloody man over and revealed his face. At this time, the clouds cleared and the moon appeared. The bright moonlight sprinkled on the bloody face of the young man. Su Li breathed hard. Even if the face became more embarrassed, she could recognize it at a glance. How could it be? Was it because of this in the previous life that his legs were disabled? Anxiety appeared on Su Li's face, but her heart was unusually calm as ice. She roughly checked that the latter was still alive. Regardless of the blood on the young man's body, she immediately dragged him into the Bai Chao Tang. In just a few minutes, there was a very rough knock on the door of the Bai Chao Tang. Before Su Li went to open the door suddenly burst with a bang. In the flying sawdust, two figures, one tall and one short, were reflected. The breath of the inborn realm was released arrogantly, and the air wave immediately swept the room into disorder. Su Li stood by the door and groaned. She forced a mouthful of blood to spit out. Then she fell into the broken wood and pretended to faint. The blood fell on the ground and reflected red plum blossoms. When the tall middle-aged man saw this scene, he immediately shook his head. Second brother was still so wicked. He even didn't let go of a mortal little doctor. The short man in a black robe squinted his triangular eyes and laughed sinisterly. That boy was plotted against by Lord Ming. He was seriously injured and almost died. He must be hiding here. The tall middle-aged man also nodded slightly. Even if he is not the hierarch of the Yinma cult, he must have a close relationship with the Yinma cult. Catch him and show him to Lord Ming. After the two of them finished their brief conversation, they immediately split up to search the 100 Herb Hall. Not long after, the entire 100 Herb Hall looked like it had been hit by a typhoon. Medicinal herbs and prescriptions were scattered everywhere. Half a quarter of an hour later, a short black-robed man walked out with a flustered and exasperated look on his face. He shrieked, "Damn it! I clearly smelled the scent of blood and came over here. How could there not be any?" The tall, middle-aged man's face darkened. "Maybe this is a trap set by this little bastard. This is a medical center. He won't walk right into our trap. We've made a mistake. Hurry up and chase after him. I have never been toyed with like this before." The short black-robed man was so angry that his voice was hoarse and unpleasant to the ears like a crow. He glanced at Su Li, who was lying in a coma in the sawdust, and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He wanted to catch the little bastard and enjoy her. "Damn it, hurry up and leave. If you lose him and Lord Ming blames you, be careful that you don't cut that thing off." The tall, middle-aged man clearly knew the black-robed man very well and warned him. The short black-robed man snorted and shot a poisonous dart into Su Li's neck. Then he turned around and left with the tall, middle-aged man. Of course, if Su Li didn't use the nothing unusual, it might be another result. The two disappeared in front of the door, but Su Li didn't get up. She still lay motionless on the ground. After another hour, the tall, middle-aged man returned and stepped into the Bai Chao Tang. He glanced at Su Li, who was lying on the ground dead for a long time, and carefully checked the traces on the ground. After confirming that no one left after they left, he shook his head disappointedly and floated away. As soon as the tall, middle-aged man left, Su Li immediately opened her eyes. She didn't have time to pull out the poisonous dart on her neck. She rolled up and cleared the sawdust under her body. A hidden doorknob immediately appeared. Opening the cellar door, Su Li carried the boy out on her back and laid him flat on the ground. She knocked open his mouth and gave him a healing elixir refined by herself. After the elixir was dissolved in his body, she was relieved and had time to check the boy's injury. After a while, Su Li raised her head and frowned. Although there are many injuries and his right leg is fractured, fortunately, there are no broken bones, so it is not difficult to treat. But his tendons and veins are broken in many places, and his internal injury is extremely serious. He is also poisoned, and the toxicity is unknown. I am afraid that I need to go to the bamboo building to make up the antidote. Su Li frowned more and more tightly. At this time, the boy suddenly coughed violently twice. His childish but angular face showed a bit of pain. Then his eyelashes trembled, and he opened his eyes. I am still alive?" The boy's throat was sweet, and his whole body was in severe pain. Suddenly, he felt a softness at the back of his head. He struggled to raise his head and found that he was lying on a girl's lap. It was her. The boy's eyes opened slightly and showed a bit of brightness. He didn't know why, but he had never cared so much about a woman. Especially now, he was running for his life and thought that he would die, but he was saved by her by chance. Suddenly, the boy thought of something, and his bloodless face became paler. He struggled to sit up. "I can't stay here. You should also run away quickly. They have killed countless people and will not leave anyone alive." This movement immediately affected his internal injury, and a mouthful of red blood gushed from his throat. Su Li was annoyed and pressed down the boy's body. She said in a very angry tone, "If you move again, don't blame me if you die." Her voice was not as sweet as usual, but hoarse and unpleasant. The boy was stunned at once, and he found that there was still a poisonous dart in Su Li's neck. They had already been here. The boy was shocked. Did she protect him? But Hei Kuei's poisonous dart sealed the throat immediately. What was going on now? At this time, he saw Su Li pull out the poisonous dart in her neck. Black blood immediately flowed from the wound, but it didn't take long for the blood to turn red. Obviously, the poison had been detoxified. In an instant, Su Li's image in the boy's eyes became mysterious. Except for the pressure of the inborn senior, Su Li felt a little tightness in her chest, but she didn't suffer much injury. After confirming that the boy was temporarily safe, she slightly tidied up the Bai Chao Tang, and then carried the boy on her back and ran along the vast night road to the valley. Lying on Su Li's back, the boy had an unprecedented mood. From childhood to adulthood, except for his mother, it seemed that no woman had carried him like this. The night wind was slightly cool, and Suli slightly raised the corner of her mouth. It seemed that she had traveled through time and space and returned to her previous life. In her previous life, she also carried her disabled husband like this, and she didn't know how many sceneries and hardships they had gone through on the mountain path. Fireflies were flying. The boy's mood had never been so calm. He looked at the girl's weak shoulder, hesitated for a moment, and asked softly, "What is your name?" "Suli," Suli said without hesitation. "This was the name you gave me in the previous life, but in this life, I have to tell you personally." "Suli." The boy's face was pale, but his smile was soft. "What a coincidence. I also have the word Li, and my name is what?" Suli suddenly stopped. Before the boy finished his words, his face had changed. Two horrible Numas rose in front of the road. The boy and Suli were very familiar with these two Numas. They were the two killers, one tall and one short. Hey, little girl, you really faked your death. No wonder I felt something wrong with the poisonous dart." The short man in a black robe walked over with a ghostly atmosphere and laughed. "Are you the holy girl of the Enma cult? I'm really disappointed. The holy girl of the Enma cult looks so ordinary." The tall, middle-aged man also walked out of the shadow, and the long knife at his waist had been unsheathed, shining with cold light. Suli's eyes slightly sank. She gently put down the boy and whispered, "You stay here and don't move." The boy's face was faintly anxious, and he quickly said in a deep voice, "Run away quickly. Don't worry about me. The elders of the Blood Refining Hall are all inborn seniors, and you are no match for them." Suli turned a deaf ear to him, and her pneuma stagnated for a moment. Then she suddenly rushed out, and the direction of the two elders was obviously to die. "Idiot!" The short man in a black robe sneered and waved his sleeves. Countless poisonous darts immediately flew out of his sleeves like a rain of flowers. The boy's pupils contracted, and he was about to rush forward regardless of his upper body. But Suli suddenly disappeared for a moment, and then appeared behind the man in a black robe. The man in a black robes looked slightly changed, and he immediately propped up the vital energy for the protection of his body. He was confident that even if he was sneak attacked, Su Li's cultivation of acquired ninth hurdle couldn't break his vital energy for the protection of his body. "I should be fooled by a silly little girl." The tall middle-aged man was unhappy, and he sneered. He immediately stepped forward, and his figure flickered. A bright knife radiance was aimed at Su Li's forehead. For a moment, the sand and stones were flying, and the knife radiance hit the ground, making a loud bang. Silly little girl, who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, dares to fight against the Blood Refining Hall with such a low cultivation? The tall, middle-aged man had a well-thought-out plan. He brandished his saber and chopped the dust away. He was extremely confident in his saber skills. That feeling just now was definitely a hit. In the future, his physical body under the heavens would still end up in pieces. The man in a black robe was teased, and he was depressed, but he still came over and praised, "Eldest brother, you are awesome." The tall, middle-aged man snorted, and he was about to teach him a lesson, but there was a strange sound behind him. He looked back in amazement and saw Su Li's head was bleeding, but she didn't die. His face was extremely ugly. "Aunt, no matter how hard you struggle, you can't escape death." The tall, middle-aged man was extremely angry. He stepped out and was about to cut down again, but he suddenly felt that he stepped on something, and a gloomy, killing intention immediately shrouded him. Suli squinted her eyes, and blood flowed from her forehead. A cold smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. "Even if I can't beat you, I can still poison you." Boom! The place where Suli stepped on just now collapsed, and it was 7 feet deep. The two elders of the Blood Refining Hall couldn't avoid it, and they fell into it one after another. "Insignificant skill," the tall, middle-aged man roared. Just as he was about to fly out of the hole, the surrounding soil seemed to have come to life, burying the two of them alive at lightning speed. Then, the originally soft soil actually became as hard as iron and stone, leaving only the two heads exposed. "What's that?" The short man screamed in horror, and he couldn't move. His body was trapped underground, and he couldn't use any means. The tall, middle-aged man would be even more miserable. His knife was also imprisoned underground, and he couldn't use it even if he had great cultivation. Suli lay on the side of the head, panting, and couldn't use any strength. The movement just now seemed easy, but in fact, it was her limit. If these two people weren't careless, she was likely to fail. The teenager stared blankly at what happened, and he didn't expect that the situation would be reversed in just a few seconds. The seemingly weak figure actually buried two inborn seniors alive in minutes. Even if he told this situation to his subordinates, no one would believe it. Thinking of this, the teenager struggled to walk over with one foot. Suli propped up her body and took out two black porcelain bottles from her arms. When the two inborn seniors saw this scene, they couldn't calm down anymore, and they closed their mouths. The teenager came over, frowned slightly, and said, "They don't have the protective genuine chi, but they still have strength. In our current state, we can't open their mouths." Suli smiled sweetly, opened a bottle, and said, "You cover your nose quickly." The teenager's expression changed, and it seemed that what he said was not difficult for her at all. Suli covered her nose and put the black porcelain bottle in front of the tall, middle-aged man. The middle-aged man suddenly felt itchy in his nose. He was extremely frightened and immediately held his breath to stop the smell. But how long could he hold his breath? The middle-aged man's face was red, and he was about to pass out. Finally, he couldn't bear it anymore. Chapter 57. At the moment when the tall, middle-aged man sneezed, Suli flicked her fingers and sent a black pill into the middle-aged man's mouth. The poison penetrated his intestines. The middle-aged man only screamed. His face turned black at a speed visible to the naked eye, and he died. Then the corpse made a sound. In the blink of an eye, there were only clothes left and no bones. Seeing this scene, the black-robed man was scared out of his wits. A chill immediately rushed from the soles of his feet to the top of his skull. This way of death was too strange and miserable. Thinking that he would suffer this kind of pain soon, he immediately howled, "Don't kill me. What do you want to know? I will tell you all. Don't kill me." The black-robed man howled and cried with snot flying. He didn't look like an elder of the blood refining hall at all. The teenager looked serious and motioned Suli to stop. He asked in a cold voice, "Who is the traitor hiding in the Enma cult? Who exposed my whereabouts?" The black-robed man widened his eyes and said tremblingly, "It turns out that you are the hierarch of the Enma cult, the unfathomable child Li in the legend of Jianghu. It is incredible that you are less than 20 years old." Then the black-robed man sighed and said, "Hierarch, I will tell you all I know. But please leave me an intact corpse. Don't let me die without an intact corpse like Elder Gao." "I promise." Suli did not hesitate and put away the black porcelain bottle. The black-robed man immediately breathed a sigh of relief and said, "I think after this plot, Hierarch should have guessed that the traitor is Zhao Ming, the person in charge of the border branch. In fact, he is not a traitor. He was originally an undercover of the blood refining hall. Under his infiltration, the entire border branch betrayed us." "I see." The teenager sighed softly. "No wonder. My hunch is right. I don't feel anything when I go to the Shuolo cult. Once I go to the border branch, I feel uncomfortable all over. The poison that Zhao Ming gave to you is the unique blood poison of the blood refining hall. If you don't cure it in time, you may end up as a disabled person. Hierarch, you should be careful." The black-robed man tried his best to say, "That's all I know. I don't have the blood poison antidote. Hierarch, please let me go with peace of mind." The teenager nodded and patted on the black-robed man's head. The black-robed man's eyes, ears, nose, and mouth immediately bled and died. Sure enough, he kept his promise and left the corpse intact. "Suli, let's go." The young man took a deep breath and regained his smile, as if what he had just heard did not affect him at all. "I haven't told you my name. My name is—" Suli waved her hand to stop the teenager. The teenager's expression was slightly stiff. His name was a great secret, but he didn't expect that he was stopped when he wanted to tell Suli. Thinking of this, Suli took out a white porcelain bottle out of nowhere and poured something like clear water on the black-robed man who was already dead. Pissed. As soon as the clear water melted, it immediately corroded everything like a strong acid. In the blink of an eye, half of the black-robed man's head had melted away, revealing the eerie white bones within. Ah! Suddenly, the already dead black-robed man opened his eyes and let out an extremely ear-piercing scream. However, the poisonous water quickly corroded his eyeballs and throat, and his voice became completely silent. The headless body trembled for a long time before it completely stopped. In the end, it slowly melted, and not even the clothes were left. The teenager swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He saw Suli put away the porcelain bottle, and a flowery smile appeared on her pale face. I heard that the blood-refining hall has a method of feigning death, which can withstand a fatal blow. I didn't expect it to be true. Now you can tell me your name. The autumn wind swept over, bringing a little coolness and also blowing into the teenager's heart. But he also felt inexplicably warm. If there was no Su Li when the black-robed man got out of the trap by feigning death, he would definitely die. My name is Ling Li, which means Ling of Heaven and Li of Separation. Su Li smiled and squinted her eyes like a crescent moon. She said, Ling Li, I like this name. The child in front of her, with a pale face, was so familiar, just like him in the previous life. The teenager's face instantly turned red. After a hard fight, Su Li carried the exhausted Ling Li to the bamboo building. It was already late at night. Fang Yuan heard the noise and walked out. When he saw Su Li covered with blood, he was suddenly shocked and said, What happened? Su Li, are you okay? Ling Li saw Fang Yuan and squinted his eyes. He was from the poisonous insect clan. I'm fine. A wounded person came to the Bai Chao Tang, and he was highly poisoned. I have to be sure to make the antidote in the bamboo building. As Su Li said, she touched the wound on her forehead and said with a smile, It's just a minor injury. I fell down and got hurt. Fang Yuan was inexplicably distressed. He quickly helped Su Li to put down Ling Li without looking at him, because he felt that this person exuded an inexplicable hostility. I'm afraid that Su Li saved a troublemaker. Fang Yuan sighed secretly. He helped Su Li carry Ling Li to the second floor and put him on the bed. Looking at the bottles and cans in the room and smelling the unique fragrance of a girl, Fang Yuan blushed and said in a low voice, Do you need help? He looked at Ling Li's bloodstains, some of which were already brown. Su Li smiled and shook her head. Don't worry and go to sleep. Doctors don't care about these things. Fang Yuan thought that Su Li must have a lot of contacts in the Bai Chao Tang. He couldn't help but scratch his head and said, That's right. I won't bother you. You can make the antidote at ease. Then he closed the door, but he didn't go to sleep. Instead, he called Chu Qingning up and they went outside to investigate. Su Li suddenly brought back a person of unknown origin, which was likely to bring disaster to the valley. But they didn't know that the two inborn seniors who could kill all the people in the valley had been buried in the wilderness by Su Li. At this moment, in the room on the second floor of the bamboo building, the atmosphere was inexplicably awkward. Ling Li was lying on the white bed. Bursts of fragrance came into his nose. He didn't know that it was Su Li's bed. His face became redder. At this time, Su Li brought a basin of water and put it on the side of the bed. Then she tore most of the rags on Ling Li's body without saying anything. Ling Li immediately panicked and rushed to the foot of the bed like a monkey. He stammered like a little wife and asked, What are you going to do? He had lived 2 lives and had never been so embarrassed. He was forced to be undressed by a woman he knew for only 1 day. Su Li looked unhappy and frowned. She said coldly, You are covered with blood. How can I cure you? If you don't want to lose all your cultivation, behave yourself. Ling Li suddenly froze. After a long time, he lay down like a robot, resigned to his fate like a fish on the chopping board. Of course, he heard the words of the black-robed man. If he didn't detoxify, he was likely to lose his cultivation. And Su Li just said that she was sure to make the poison. If he could recover to his heyday, this shame was nothing. Su Li picked up the towel and wiped the boy's thick chest. Her eyes were indescribably gentle. It was good to do it like in the previous life. In the previous life, I also wiped your body like this. Husband, After an hour, Su Li finally cleaned the blood on Ling Li's body, revealing countless knife and sword wounds. This time, Ling Li did escape from death. He escaped from dozens of killers in the border branch. He was almost covered with cuts and bruises. After applying the ointment to Ling Li, Su Li also felt a little tired. If she made the medicine in this state, she couldn't guarantee that there would be no mistakes. She applied some medicine to her forehead and turned back. I will test the poison for you tomorrow. You can rest well today. Then, Su Li closed the door without hesitation and left. Looking at the dim light in the room, Ling Li was almost tied up like a mummy, but he was cool all over. The wounds were no longer burning. The poison in his body was also suppressed by him. It didn't cause trouble for the time being. Only his tendons and veins were aching. I don't know if Ling Mo got the news. Ling Li sighed and closed his eyes. But his mind was full of the wound on Su Li's neck. The weak figure stood in front of him and fought desperately for him. You and I don't know each other. Why do you risk your life to save me? In the morning of the next day, people in the Desu town saw the ruined Bai Chao Tang. They were suddenly in a mess and worried about Su Li's safety. But Su Li usually appeared at night. They could only help Su Li clean up the medicine cabinet and wait for her to come back. Who is so heartless to steal the money of the Bai Chao Tang? Evil thief. If you dare to steal the medicine of the Bai Chao Tang, be careful of diseases. I heard that the Nanjiang country is very chaotic recently. Is it done by the refugees of the Nanjiang country? Alas, the world is really chaotic. Let's not talk about the comments among people for the time being. At this moment, Su Li was also entangled by someone and asked about the wound on her forehead. Second miss, what's the matter with the wound on your head? He sure looked at the white cloth on Su Li's head distressed and said, if there is a scar, it will not look good. Su Li touched her forehead and smiled. It doesn't matter. It's just a fall. It's a minor injury. It will be fine in 2 days. That's good. He sure breathed a sigh of relief and said, I heard that the new female doctor of the Bai Chao Tang is very powerful. Miss, you can go to see her. Maybe there will be no scar. But I heard that the Bai Chao Tang was robbed. I don't know how the female doctor is. Su Li's eyes flashed, and she said, then I will go to see her at night. After dealing with the affairs of the Bai Chao Tang, Su Li immediately returned to the valley. She saw Ling Li lying on the rattan chair in the yard and basking in the sun. It seemed that his injury was much better and he could walk. Hierarch of the Yinma cult, Child Li, Su Li muttered to herself and walked over. As early as in the previous life, she should have thought that the destruction of the Yinma cult and the disappearance and appearance of her disabled husband almost happened at the same time. Speaking of the crime of treason, the hierarch of the Yinma cult certainly could bear it. The imperial court almost dreamed of wiping out the forces of the Yinma cult in the martial arts circle. She was called the female devil in the previous life and bore the brunt. Seeing Su Li coming in, Ling Li turned his head and smiled, showing 2 sharp canine teeth. You are here. If the people of the Yinma cult and the Shuilo cult saw this smile, they would be so shocked that their eyeballs would fall out. Child Li, who only knew how to fake, sneer, and evil smile, could also smile so warmly and softly. She saw that Haydn and other little beggars were squatting in the yard with bare arms. Chu Qingning was not around. Haydn looked at Chu Qingning from time to time. He even worshipped Chu Qingning. Are you teaching him Xingong? Su Li asked in surprise. Ling Li nodded with a smile and said, I have received such a great favor from you. I have to show something. Su Li's face immediately became cold, and her voice was cold. Do you think that I saved you because I want to repay you? Ling Li was stunned and didn't know how to explain. Before he opened his mouth, Su Li had already snorted coldly and turned to leave the yard. He was annoyed and immediately chased after her. Haydn laughed and said, Bustling must be interested in Sister Li. As soon as Haydn said that, some people were not convinced and said, Humph, we all know it. We are not fools. Yes, yes. Bustling's life is saved by Sister Su Li. Of course, he should devote himself to her. The little beggars took it for granted, but Haydn was lost in thought and said, This is troublesome. If Sister Li likes Boss Ling, what about our boss? Yes, yes, our boss doesn't have a wife either. Don't forget that Boss Fong is here. Wow, it's so messy. Let's leave it alone. A group of little boys were chattering. Chu Qingning, who was hiding outside the yard, heard these words and suddenly became speechless. These silly boys were really ignorant and fearless. Although the boy brought back by Su Li seemed to be only a few years older than them, his pneuma was really horrible. He only saw it from the elders of the family. If they really fought, he was afraid that he couldn't take one move. It was still under the premise that the boy was seriously injured. Was the background of the boy brought back by Su Li? He should be a young master. Is he the crown prince of country? Chapter 58. Ling Li followed Su Li all the way to the second floor of the bamboo building. He wanted to explain, but found that he didn't know how to explain. Su Li saw that Ling Li didn't say a word. She looked colder and said sarcastically, "Why don't you continue to repay the kindness? Why do you go upstairs with me?" Ling Li was inexplicably ridiculed when he helped her. He couldn't help but get angry. He said coldly, "I really want to repay the kindness by teaching them. Even the members of the cult are rarely qualified to practice those martial arts. Why are you angry?" "Hierarch, you must be joking. I'm just a common person in the Desa town. How dare I be angry with you?" Su Li looked indifferent and grabbed a long-haired spider from a jar. She said, "Xiangong is precious. I can't repay you. I can only help you to test the antidote." Ling Li looked at the colorful spider in Su Li's hand, which was bigger than his fist. He suddenly broke into a cold sweat. Could this lass be seizing the opportunity to take revenge? "What? You are the hierarch of the Yinma cult. Don't you even have the courage to test the poison? Or are you afraid of being poisoned by me?" Although he knew that Su Li was goading him, Ling Li was surprisingly uncomfortable. He snorted and sat on the edge of the bed. He said calmly, "Let's start." In his previous life, he had gone through mountains of knives and fires, and even hell. How could he be afraid of a poisonous spider? Seeing that Ling Li was ready, Su Li patted the abdomen of the spider gently. The spider immediately spat out a spider silk and went deep into Ling Li's throat. It was like a small snake swimming through his internal organs. Ling Li felt extremely disgusted. He couldn't help but swallow, but he still resisted swallowing. After a short while, it was almost time. Su Li let the spider take back the spider silk. The white and transparent spider silk had become dark. Some places were colorful, which was very strange. Ling Li was frightened. He had a little knowledge of poison. What was the blood poison in his body? It could be divided into so many different kinds of poisons. Su Li cut the spider silk and put it back in the jar. Then she took out a knife and carefully peeled off the poison. He took a small portion of it and poured it into a transparent glass bottle. Then, he poured a few drops of clear liquid into it. The black poison immediately turned colorful. Ling Li didn't quite understand it. Every profession had its own specialization. Although his cultivation was far higher than Su Li's, he was no match for Su Li when it came to poisoning and detoxification. Even the two inborn elders of the blood refining hall were easily killed by Su Li. Su Li lowered her eyes and stared at the toxins that constantly contaminated the serum. Various powders were constantly added, and the colors changed constantly. Sometimes it was as ferocious as a skeleton, and sometimes it bloomed like a bloody flower. Ling Li soon found that the colors in the glass bottle changed from black, colorful, red, light yellow, and then became lighter and lighter until it was almost colorless. The poison was almost cured. Suddenly, a black mist rose from the bottom of the bottle and directly dyed all the serum black. The whole bottle of serum boiled with a gurgling sound and burned into nothingness in the blink of an eye. Su Li snorted coldly. She gathered all the smoke and passed it into the fallen fluid. The toxins immediately quieted down as if they had lost all their vitality. Needless to say, Ling Li also knew that Su Li failed. He moved his lips and was about to comfort her. But Su Li had turned around and said indifferently, "The blood poison of the blood refining hall is quite capable. It actually uses the bloody yang flower to refine the yang poison. Then, it is supplemented by 49 kinds of poisonous flowers and grasses, producing 147 kinds of changes. I still need to test the poison many times before I can grasp it accurately. Ling Li's words of comfort were stuck in his throat. He didn't say anything for a long time. Su Li's tone was obviously extremely confident. She didn't seem to be frustrated at all, and it only took her less than an hour to figure out the details of the blood poison. He found that he still underestimated Su Li's means of poison. You live in a valley these days and can't go out. Don't touch my things. Don't practice martial arts at random. Su Li said 3 requirements in a row. It was not so much a request as an order. Ling Li was stunned and couldn't help but ask, "What can I do?" Su Li glanced at Ling Li and said, "Eat and sleep. Hierarch, enjoy this useless time." Seeing that Su Li finished her words and left directly, Ling Li's gentle eyes flashed a trace of helplessness. He didn't know how to provoke her. She was so fierce. Although he didn't know whether Su Li's requirements were true or not, Ling Li still carefully sealed his cultivation. If he really delayed detoxification because of using Xiangong at random, it would be bad. The Xiangong he practiced since he was in his mother's womb was still of great use. After temporarily solving the problem in the valley, Su Li became a doctor and came to the Baichao Tang to clean up the mess. The Baichao Tang had been cleaned up by the people and staff of the Desa town. Even the door had been replaced. As soon as Su Li appeared, the people watching around the clinic immediately surrounded her with surprise. "Dr. Xue Li is here." "Great, Dr. Xue Li is fine." A group of men and women in coarse clothes, old and young, were chattering. Su Li smiled and stretched out her hand to press gently. Everyone immediately shut up. In their minds, Su Li was a living bodhisattva like Qi Xianqing. Of course, they should listen to bodhisattva's words. Last night, the Baichao Tang was robbed, and I was frightened a lot. Fortunately, it's not a big deal. I come a little late today. Let's start to see patients now. Su Li knew that it was easy to reveal flaws if she said too much. She just mentioned it roughly and started to see patients today. Everyone immediately became obedient and queued up spontaneously. Su Li also began a new day of medical experience. Although the people in the town only had some minor diseases and chronic diseases, Su Li could feel that she had a deeper foundation in the Ghost Valley meditation direction every time she felt their pulse. The Ghost Valley meditation direction is really the treasure of Medical Circle. With the accumulation of many days, she could feel that she was getting closer and closer to the inborn realm, and there was a hint of premonition. It seemed that there was a force that wanted to break the bondage and burst out. Will there be other changes in the Ghost Valley meditation direction after I reach the inborn realm? Su Li thought deeply. Qi Xianqing could never think that her practice progress was so exaggerated, so he didn't mention what kind of world it would be after she reached the inborn realm. Su Li went back and forth between the valley and the Desu town day after day. Half a month had passed, and Su Li didn't return to the Su house once. Ling Li had detoxified half of the poison. The other half changed in the process of detoxification, so Su Li needed to test the poison again. When Ling Li heard the news, his face was extremely pale. Seeing that, Chu Qingning laughed wildly in secret. It was because Su Li's detoxification method was too horrible. Ling Li had to swallow dozens of poisons and couldn't eat anything else during the period. The taste of the poisons couldn't be better. Ling Li retched more than a dozen times a day. His stomach became a battlefield for various poisons to fight. His internal organs were all burned. The torture in the hell was just like this. Fang Yuan secretly vowed that he would never be poisoned in the future. Otherwise, he would be half dead because of Su Li's torture. Didn't he see that Ling Li, a young master, was already pale? On the second floor of the bamboo building, Ling Li saw Su Li disappear at the entrance of the valley. Then he put down the bamboo window and turned back to lie down. Since he came here, Su Li had never lived in the bamboo building. No matter how late it was, she returned to the Baiwei building. It seemed that she didn't want to stay in the same place with him for too long. Looking at the low roof of the bamboo building, Ling Li was lost in thought. Su Li, was she really detoxifying him? His current skin color was several times darker than before, and he felt that his body was very heavy. The status of the blood refining hall was lower than that of the Shuolo cult. The Yinma cult couldn't compare with it. Such a small sect was not famous for refining poisons in the martial arts circle. How could the so-called unique blood poison be so difficult to deal with? The seeds of suspicion gradually germinated. Lingley was more inclined to believe that Su Li was carrying out a secret method while curing the poison for him. Su Li, are you an enemy or a friend? If you really want to poison me, why did you save me at the beginning? Lingley closed his eyes with a heavy heart. He had lived 2 lives and thought that he could understand human nature. But he didn't expect that there would be a woman like Su Li who made him confused. Su Li left the valley and came to the Baichao Tang in the wind and frost of late autumn. Qi Xianqing still left for nearly 2 months. The people in the Desu town had long been accustomed to the existence of the new doctor. As the night went on, there were fewer patients. After the manservant of the Baichao Tang left, Su Li had to see patients and fill the prescription at the same time. The efficiency was reduced by half. At this time, another person stepped in the door. His footsteps were steady but a little weak. Su Li said without raising her head, "Newcomer, please sit at the door and wait for me to finish seeing the patients in front." Then there was no answer for a long time. Su Li noticed that something was wrong. She looked up and saw the face of the person. Her pupils couldn't help but shrink slightly. In front of the bench at the door, a cold-faced teenager covered with blood stood still. His chest rose and fell slightly. He exhaled white gas from his nose from time to time. His right hand drooped. Drops of blood fell to the ground and made a patter sound. The rest of the people saw such a terrible injury of the teenager. They all kept silent and didn't dare to speak. Some people even secretly observed the escape route. Even if Su Li lived like a bodhisattva, human nature was always selfish. At this time, everyone wanted to escape, and no one thought about Su Li's life or death. Su Li breathed slightly and said in a deep voice, "The injury on your right shoulder is not light. Fortunately, you won't die for a while. Sit there for a while and wait for me to see the rest of the patients." The corner of the cold teenager's mouth twitched with a trace of astonishment. It seemed that he didn't expect that Su Li could say this calmly in front of him. He looked around and hesitated for a moment. Then he sat straight on the bench. The rest of the people were relieved. It turns out that he also comes to see a doctor. The boy really scared me when he just came in. He is injured all over. I am afraid that he was bitten by a beast. Fortunately, he can escape from death. There's so many naughty kids now. I don't know which kid is so arrogant. Tut tut, the patients whispered in a very low voice. They thought that they would not be heard by others. But they didn't know that all the words were clearly heard by Su Li and the cold teenager. Chapter 59. After a while, the last patient left happily with the medicine bag. Su Li waved to the cold boy and said, "Come here. I will help you apply the medicine." Ling Mo's eyes flashed coldly. He walked over and sat opposite to Su Li. But he didn't take the initiative to lift the clothes on his shoulders. Instead, he asked, "Did you save a boy who was almost the same age as me half a month ago?" Su Li stopped grinding the medicine and looked up at Ling Mo for a moment. She suddenly smiled and said, "What's the relationship between you and the boy? What will happen if I save him? And what will happen if I don't?" Ling Mo's pupils contracted and he shouted coldly, "Take me to him. If my relationship with him is exposed, it will only bring you a fatal disaster. You're just a doctor. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." Su Li's smile slowly disappeared. She showed a colder look than Ling Mo. "A fatal disaster? I remember that you have long wanted to kill me. If I kill your bamboo, it is just a matter of course. Why can't he pay for it with his life?" Then Su Li's face slowly changed and returned to its original appearance. Ling Mo's expression changed dramatically. He instantly retreated, and his face was full of killing intent. "Did you kill the master?" Su Li slowly picked her nails and smiled. When he came over, he was covered with blood. There were countless saber and sword wounds all over his body. His legs were broken, and there was a strange poison circulating in his body. He was on his last breath. Even if I didn't kill him, he would die. Why are you angry with me? I will kill you. Ling Mo's eyes turned red instantly. The sword on his waist was unsheathed with a clang. A flash of sword light crossed the air and pierced Su Li's face. At the same time, blood gushed out from Ling Mo's shoulder. The dried blood on his chest was instantly wet. Su Li smiled and tilted her head slightly. She easily avoided the sword. In Ling Mo's shocked eyes, she gently tapped the tip of the sword with her index finger. Clang! There was a continuous buzzing in the air. A powerful force was transmitted from the tip of the sword. Ling Mo's wrist trembled violently, and the wound on his shoulder became deeper. He finally couldn't hold the long sword anymore. It fell to the ground with a whine. You! Ling Mo was angry and anxious. The enemy who killed his brother was in front of him, but he was not his opponent. If he was at his peak, how could he be beaten down by a person in the acquired 9th hurdle? Suddenly, Ling Mo raised his head and spat out a mouthful of black blood. He fell to the ground. Seeing Su Li approaching slowly, his indomitable, tenacious consciousness could not hold on any longer, and he fell into darkness in an instant. Su Li picked up Ling Mo with one hand and threw him by the door. Then she shook her head and cleaned the ground. Since she saved Ling Li, trouble came one after another. The bastard was poisoned, but he still took a breath to fight. He really didn't want to live. Fine, for his sake, I'll save this kid's life. After cleaning up, Su Li picked up the long sword and ran all the way with Ling Mo. She didn't help Ling Mo until she came out of the valley. Hearing the noise, Fang Yuan and Chu Qingming walked out with vigilance. Su Li would not come to the valley at this time. When they arrived at the entrance of the valley, they were dumbfounded to see that Su Li brought back another teenager. Where did Su Li bring back a seriously injured person? Did he send himself to the door, like Ling Li? When they came to the bamboo building, Ling Li, who sealed his cultivation, heard the noise. He opened the door and saw the teenager brought by Su Li. His face changed dramatically. Ling Mo. Ling Li walked quickly to Ling Mo and asked nervously, "Where did you find him? How is his injury?" Looking at the large bloodstain on Ling Mo's chest, the piercing wound on his shoulder, and the crisscross scars on his body, Ling Li's knuckles turned white, and his calm expression was a little flustered. Seeing Ling Li's expression, Su Li felt a little uncomfortable and snorted, "He won't die. Fang Yuan, move him to the yard." Fang Yuan nodded and was about to move, but Ling Li shook his head and said, "Let him live with me. I said he lives in the yard. So he lives in the yard." Su Li suddenly raised her voice and said coldly, "Ling Li, don't forget that I am the owner of this valley." Ling Li squinted his eyes and immediately stood up to confront Su Li. "Then I will live in a yard with him, and you can have the bamboo building back." Su Li laughed out of anger and said lightly, "Go ahead. I won't stop you. I will cure the poison in your body." Ling Li's face was completely gloomy. "Forget it. I will take him away." Then, Ling Li was about to carry Ling Mo on his back and turn to walk out of the valley. Su Li said calmly, "I have nothing to say if you don't cherish your own life. But Ling Mo is also poisoned. If you walk out of here, he will become a dead body within one day. Don't blame me for not reminding you." Hearing this, Ling Li's movement was completely stiff, and the atmosphere was stagnant for a moment. An inexplicable and horrible pneuma slowly emanated from Ling Li. Fang Yuan and Chu Qingming groaned at the same time, and their eyes were full of horror. This was the momentum that only inborn seniors could master. Ling Li was really an inborn senior and a young master. Su Li's face was pale, and she clenched her teeth. There was a layer of tears in her eyes. It turned out that in his heart, she was not as good as Ling Mo. "If you use your cultivation, I will not care about you anymore." A stubborn voice with a trace of crying sounded. Ling Li was stunned and looked back. When he saw the tears in the girl's eyes, he loosened his hands and smiled bitterly. What on earth was he fighting for with this girl? Finally, Fang Yuan successfully placed Ling Mo in the yard. Su Li came to treat him with medicine, but she hit him very hard. Even if Ling Mo was in a coma, he couldn't help but moan in pain. Fang Yuan, who was helping, was shocked. Since Ling Li came, Su Li's temper was really more and more difficult to guess. At this moment, outside the house, Ling Li sat together with Chu Qingming and others. There was a trace of worry in his eyes from time to time. Although Ling Mo was an attendant he picked up when he was a child, he was also the head of the Shuelo cult, who was cultivated by him. Ling Li regarded him as a brother. If something happened to Ling Mo, how could he go back and explain to other brothers? Don't worry. Chu Qingning comforted him. Su Li's medical skills are very good. She can even cure you, not to mention the boy. Ling Li didn't say anything and nodded slightly. But in his mind, the bloody hole in Ling Mo's right shoulder appeared from time to time. That was the trace left by the long spear. Haydn and others were also outside and whispered from time to time. Miss Su Li is so strange today. She is inexplicably angry. In my opinion, Sister Su Li is obviously jealous. What were you jealous of? A group of melon kids instantly became excited and looked at Haydn, who had just spoken. Haydn smiled wretchedly and whispered, "Who else can it be? It must be Boss Ling. Didn't you see that Boss Ling was nervous when he saw the new boy today? Sister Su Li must be jealous. Then she'll be angry, won't she?" Wow, it seems to make sense after listening to what you said. Chu Qingning and Ling Li's ears were so sharp that they heard these whispers clearly. Chu Qingning's face immediately became as black as the bottom of a pot. He turned back and scolded, "Bastard! How can you say this? Get out of here. Don't gossip here." Haydn opened his eyes wide. He didn't expect that all his words were heard. He immediately took a group of subordinates out of the yard in fear. "Hey, those guys are talking nonsense. Don't take it to heart." Chu Qingning turned back and smiled. Ling Li was cold all day long. It was impossible for Su Li to fall in love with him. Ling Li nodded calmly, but his heart was in turmoil. He recalled the inexplicable quarrel just now. The image of Su Li's tears in her eyes became clearer. From the first time they met, the girl showed extremely abnormal emotions. Did she really know him? Was she really... Shwe. Squeak. At this time, the sound of opening the door interrupted Ling Li's thoughts. Su Li walked out with a cold face. She glanced at Ling Li, who wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Then she turned away without saying anything. The atmosphere was really stiff. Feng Yuan shook his head and sighed. He said for Su Li, "The poison in the body of the one in the room has been cleared by Su Li. The tendons and vessels on his shoulders have been reconnected, but he was seriously injured. I'm afraid that he needs to rest for 3 or 4 days to recover completely by his own cultivation." Ling Li breathed a sigh of relief and obediently returned to the bamboo building. However, he saw that Su Li, who looked tired, was testing the poison for him again. Ling Li was stunned. He hesitated for a while and finally walked behind Su Li. He said softly, "I'm sorry. He is a very important brother to me. Thank you." Su Li stopped. When she heard the words of the man who had always been arrogant behind her, her anger disappeared. She pretended to snort coldly, but she couldn't help smiling. Ling Li stood behind her and couldn't see her. When he heard the snort, he scratched his head. He had never been alone with a girl in his previous life and this life. How could he know that Su Li was in a good mood at the moment? After testing a poison, it was already late at night. Ling Li didn't fall asleep. He got up and saw Su Li stop. He couldn't help but suggest, "It's too late to go back today. Why don't you stay here for the night?" Su Li's movement was stiff. She didn't look at Ling Li. She turned around and opened the bamboo door to leave. Ling Li was more and more confused. Then he was suddenly shocked. Did Su Li misunderstand something? He just asked her to stay in the yard. Asterisk, 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 the boundless darkness lasted for a long time. Ling Mo struggled to open his eyes, but his eyes were blurred. Could it be that this place was hell? He still remembered the scene when he was in a coma in front of Su Li. His vision was blurred for a moment and suddenly became clear. Ling Mo finally saw clearly that it was the roof. "I'm not dead yet." Ling Mo was stunned. It shouldn't be. He had already become a fish on the chopping board. Su Li had no reason not to kill him. Suddenly, he felt shadows moving. After forcing himself to turn his gaze, he immediately saw a row of young boys blinking their eyes. These young boys looked to be no more than 8 or 9 years old. Their clothes were not expensive, but they were very clean and tidy. Is he awake? Haydn pointed to Ling Mo's face and asked. The silly boys behind him immediately nodded. Haydn immediately gave little boy a knock on the head. What are you waiting for? Go and call the bosses. A group of silly boys immediately left. Bosses? Ling Mo was full of doubts. Was it possible that he was saved by the leader of an organization? After a while, a figure rushed into the room like a phantom. When Ling Mo saw the person clearly, he immediately widened his eyes and shouted unbelievably, Master! Ling Li saw that Ling Mo could speak, so he immediately breathed a sigh of relief. He smiled and said, Don't worry. You're lucky and have a good life. Everything is fine now. But yesterday, before Ling Mo finished his words, Haydn interrupted, It was Sister Su Li who carried you back. You were about to die at that time. Sister Su Li saved you. And Boss Ling, if it weren't for Sister Su Li, he would have been dead. You brat, I haven't beaten you for one day. How dare you? You dare to say anything. As soon as Chu Qingning came in, he heard Haydn's clamor. He immediately chased after Haydn and beat him violently. Ling Mo was completely confused in the continuous screams. What the hell was going on? After the farce, others left, leaving Ling Li and Haydn to talk. Ling Mo immediately told them what happened last night. Ling Li was silent again. After a while, he said, Zhao Ming is from the blood refining hall. Chapter 60. Su Li tried to test you last night. Ling Li's tone was calm, but his heart was in turmoil. He said, If you hadn't been provoked last night, she might not have saved you or brought you here. Ling listened blankly and couldn't help blurting out, Master, is Su Li your mistress outside? Ling Li's face trembled when he heard the words. He said sharply, How is it possible? Don't say that again. Oh, Ling Mo nodded obediently, but he felt that the master was trying to cover something up. He remembered that there was a peerless enchantress in the Yinma cult. He couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He really didn't know the master. Unfortunately, Su Li's appearance was not as good as that one. According to the boy's temperament of pursuing perfection, he should choose her. By the way, where did you find this place? Ling Mo immediately became serious when Ling Li asked about the business. He said in a low voice, Master, after you went to the banquet that day, I took people to the border and killed the enemy general before second brother Ling met the enemy. The whole journey was extremely smooth. When I dismissed my men and went to the border branch to find you, I was ambushed. While I got rid of the pursuers, I came to find you. Then I heard that the medical house in the Desa town was robbed, so I came to investigate. Ling Li heard the words and was lost in thought. Ling Mo kept quiet consciously. After a while, Ling Li raised his head and there seemed to be a flash of red in his eyes. After you recover, take people of the Shualo cult to the branch in the Qinghai province. If there is no traitor, hide. If there is, kill them and block the news. Then come back and clean the border branch. Ling Li's words were full of human lives. At this moment, Ling Li finally showed the demeanor of the hierarch of the Yinma cult. Ling Mo nodded without hesitation. He was a killing sword in the hands of the master. Then, Ling Li's tone suddenly became light and seemed to be a little gentle. Go to the Desu town and check the Su house. I heard that Su Li was driven out of the house. You go and have a look. Ling Mo couldn't help but smile strangely when he heard the words. The master really said one thing and meant another. 3 days later, Ling Mo really left the valley. Su Li didn't care about his whereabouts at all, because Fang Yuan told her that the glutinous rice that was fermented a few days ago had been made into wine. Su Li came in a hurry and went into the warehouse without looking at Ling Li. She moved jars of polished glutinous rice out. Ling Li felt strange and came over to have a look. He was immediately caught by Su Li. Ling Li opened the jar and smelled the fragrance of the wine. He was shocked and asked, Are you making wine? Su Li glanced at him meaningfully, but said, Isn't it obvious? Is it possible that Hierarch Ling was injured and hurt his brain? Ling Li was used to Su Li's disagreeable temperament. He shut up sensibly and didn't ask again. However, the throbbing in his heart became more and more obvious. The taste of this wine was made in his previous life. The brewery of Dahan country didn't brew wine like this. Su Li definitely had something to do with the world before he crossed over. Su Li didn't pay attention to Ling Li, who was in a daze. She put the fine gauze on the mouth alone, poured the fermented wine into the gauze, and poured cold water on the wine. The water drops fell. Her eyes gradually became dazed, and pictures flashed in front of her. The man sat on the wooden chair and guided her to move the gauze, pour the wine, and make the best wine with various tastes. Su Li, are you okay? Su Li suddenly woke up. She saw the face of the man in front of her. He was less gentle and more calm and indifferent. I'm fine. Su Li took a deep breath and began to rub the rice with her hands until the wine was rubbed down. The remaining rice dregs were poured away. Then she began to filter the wine. After all the jars were filtered, there was a whole jar of thick wine left. Ling Li consciously carried the jar to the kitchen and poured the thick wine into the pot. Su Li looked at this scene in a daze. There was an impulse in her heart. She wanted to tell him everything and live with him in the valley for a lifetime. But she knew that everything was wishful thinking. When she cured Ling Li's injury, they would not meet each other on the surface. She would only help him secretly and help him become an emperor. She wouldn't see him again in this life. Her way back should be to go back to hell. Why should she take him with her? Boil it and then put it into the porcelain bucket. Su Li's tone was a little trembling. She took a deep breath again and calmed down. She said, I have dried osmanthus and sugar in my bamboo house. You should know what to do. Then she left the valley regardless of Ling Li's dull face. It's really you, Shui. Ling Li looked at the thick wine in the pot and stood still. He wanted to catch up with her and ask why she killed him in the previous life. But in the end, he still failed to summon up the courage. Su Li didn't go back to the valley for a few days. She had tested the new poison, and the rest of the medicine bags were put on the table according to the day. As long as Ling Li was not stupid, he would naturally take it on time. On this day, Su Li came to the Byway building, but she didn't see the humble figure of shopkeeper Wu as usual. Miss, shopkeeper Wu caught a cold and was bedridden. I was worried that it was not appropriate for me to send the account book to him. He sure came over and told the reason. He touched his head and smiled embarrassedly. Now, there were many more chefs in the Byway building, but he sure still had the highest status among them. This was not only because he sure was the first to rely on the Byway building, but also because in the operation of the Byway building for half a year, he sure learned from Su Li's cooking skills and made rapid progress in cooking. He could already make the precious beggar's chicken by himself. But he sure consciously only told Su Li this secret, and he didn't tell the Su house. He also faintly perceived the attitude of the Su family toward Su Li. He regarded Su Li as a little master, so he was naturally indignant and stood on Su Li's side. Then I will send it to him in person. Speaking of which, I haven't gone back for a long time. I don't know how my father is doing. Su Li sighed. He sure couldn't help but feel sad. Su Li was such an outstanding woman, but she was born in a ruthless family. Unfortunately, he had no ability to help Su Li change her fate, so he could only sigh helplessly. Su Li sat in the carriage, and her heart was calm. The carriage stopped in front of the Su house. Su Li's expression had returned to her usual tenderness. She hesitated for a moment and then stepped into the Su house. But before she could step into the Su house, she was stopped by two strange guards. The head of the family ordered that no one is allowed to enter recently. Su Li seemed to be frightened. Her face was slightly pale, and she retorted without confidence. Who are you? I am the second miss of the Su family. Why haven't I seen you before? The guard standing on the right sneered and said proudly, Second miss, I naturally recognize your appearance. We are the guards newly recruited by old Madam Su. Second miss, please go back. Old Madam ordered that you, especially you, must not enter the Su house during this time. Su Li's body trembled slightly, and she stepped back a few steps absent-mindedly. Even the account book in her hand fell to the ground. The guard saw the account book on the ground and immediately picked it up and said, It turns out that you are here to deliver the account book. I will take you to deliver it. Miss, please go back. Su Li's eyes were watery, and a drop of tear fell to the ground and splashed the dust. The guard on the left couldn't bear it and wanted to get out of the way. but he was warned by the guard on the right with a fierce look and whispered, "Don't forget how Xiaojiao and other boys were driven out of the Su family." The guard on the left was stiff and immediately stopped. He looked up and only saw Su Li climb into the carriage and leave. After entering the carriage, Su Li wiped away her tears, and her expression quickly returned to indifference. Feng Yuan, who was driving the carriage, heard that the breath inside quickly calmed down. He immediately curled his lips and couldn't help but ask, "What's the point of doing this? With your achievements in the poison circle, isn't it a piece of cake to deal with the Su family?" Su Li chuckled and said, "That's boring. If that's all I want, why come back again?" Feng Yuan lowered his eyes and was puzzled. Come back again? What did that mean? They had promised each other not to explore each other's background. But now Feng Yuan wanted to know the past of the girl behind him, and then help her vent her anger. There were two ends of a flower, and each was a branch. At this moment, in the Jinyuan court, Zhu Yin and Su Zipei immediately knew that Su Li left. Su Zipei heard that Su Li left with tears and couldn't help but laugh. "Ha ha ha, mother, it's really a relief. I remember that when Su Li was driven away that day, she didn't shed a tear. I thought she really didn't care about it at all." Zhu Yin touched her belly and took a long breath. She smiled and said, "It's just a small advantage. Zipei, you should have a long-term vision. If you wait until we drive her out of the Su family, it won't be too late to be happy." "I know, mother." Su Zipei rolled her eyes and whispered beside Zhu Yin, "Mother, do you have any good ideas?" "Well, you go to find Witch Tang again," and so on. Su Zipei's eyes lit up and she said excitedly, "Great. Grandma heard what Witch Tang said. She will definitely pester father to marry Su Li. In this way, Su Li can stay in the Desa town and won't be afraid that she will make trouble in Yunjing. Mother, you are so great." Zhu Yin heard her daughter's praise and felt happy. She reached out and touched Su Zipei's nose. She said angrily, "Go quickly. Don't let others find you." "I know." Su Zipei changed into an inconspicuous outfit and sneaked out from the back door of Jean Garden. However, she did not notice that the moment she left the Su family, a black shadow immediately followed behind her. Su Zipei thought to herself, "That's right." An hour later, Su Zipei returned to the Jinyuan court with a proud face. She thought that no one knew her and confidently went to her mother to ask for credit. Ling Yimo, who was in the dark, snorted and turned away. In the valley, Ling Li was holding a pot of osmanthus wine and lying on the rattan chair. He squinted his eyes leisurely. At this moment, a breeze blew. Ling Li still didn't open his eyes and said, "You are back. How is it going?" Ling Yimo stood still and glanced at the wine pot in Ling Li's hand. He shook his head and chuckled. He didn't expect that the master still had the leisure to brew wine. It seemed that the blood poison in his body was no longer a problem. "Master, Zhao Ming really hid in the distribution of the Qinghe province. A few traders in the Qinghe province have been killed. In addition, the distribution of the border has been cleaned up. The new branch candidates are waiting for you to decide." Ling Li immediately sat up and opened his eyes. His eyes were rarely serious. He said, "How is the investigation of Su Li going?" Ling Yimo thought of what he saw during the day and silently thought for a while. He wanted to find a wording that wouldn't make the master angry, but he couldn't find it at all. He sighed and said, "The situation of Miss Su Li doesn't seem to be so." "What?" Ling Yimo sat straighter, but he didn't notice it. He said, "Tell me in detail. Don't miss any detail." Ling Yimo felt more strange and finally told what he saw and heard. Hearing the suffering of Su Li from childhood to adulthood, Ling Yimo couldn't help but bite his lips and breathe slightly. The scene of seeing Su Li for the first time reappeared in his mind. It turned out that she was far less beautiful than she looked. In contrast, how happy he was in this life. I also heard that the first madam of the Su house, that is, the biological mother of Miss Su Li, bribed the witch to fabricate a story that would harm her brother's life. The old woman of the Su house believed it and drove Miss Su Li out of the Su family. Zhu Yin was not dissatisfied. Today, she bribed the witch to come up with a more exaggerated story. Chapter 61. Nonsense. After hearing the witch's words, Su Huanli was furious. He pounded the table and stood up. Witch Zhao, what are you talking about? If my daughter is really so tough, she would have killed my family long ago. It's not your turn to say that. In the central room, the witch in colorful clothes shrank her neck and said in a low voice, Master, you're wrong. Miss Su is really the bane of her younger brother's life. She looks like a fox, and the atmosphere in the heavens is extremely gloomy. She will inevitably bring a fatal disaster to her younger brother. At the critical moment, we can only marry Miss Su. The worse the marriage is, the better the life of the child in the belly of the first madam will be. It is even possible that the child will be promoted and be better than the first master in the future, which was an expert at playing tricks. Her words, coupled with her sinister tone, sent chills down everyone's spines. Zhu Yin was afraid, but she praised in her heart. Witch Zhao was really capable. Even Su Huanli, who never believed in these things, was stunned. Ma'am, Su Chui was unhappy when she heard her son's words. She pounded the table and scolded. Huanli, how can you say that? You should have a limit to protect area. Now your son is still in the belly of Zhu Yin, but you protect the bane of your younger brother's life. Is it reasonable? I tell you, today I will find a husband for area. Don't make me angry. After ma'am, Su Chui scolded Su Huanli. She left with the help of Su Zipei, regardless of Su Huanli's angry face. Ma'am, Su Chui left. Witch Zhao would not stay here to make trouble for herself. She said goodbye and turned away. At this time, Li Yin, who stood aside silently, came forward and reminded in a low voice, Master, although the Han country is not against superstition, if they know that our Su family did such a ridiculous thing just because of the witch's words, I am afraid that the first master will be ridiculed. What kind of magic potion did Zhu Yin give my mother? If she were not pregnant, I would have divorced her long ago. Su Huanli waved his sleeves and said, You don't have to worry about it. Even if my mother finds a husband for Li, I will not agree. Li Yin frowned. The master's attitude seemed to be very firm. After all, the second miss was the main source of income of the Su family. But he thought it was just polite words. Shouldn't they send someone to protect the second miss? What if the old woman makes trouble? Li Yin shook his head and left. Forget it. It was better to send Little Nine and the others to secretly protect second Mississippi Little Nine, and the others were not considered people of the Su family, so they did not go against the old master's orders. After Li Yin retreated, Su Huanli restrained his anger and was full of helplessness. How could he not know that it was Zhu Yin who made trouble for him this time? He didn't want to marry Su Li or let Su Li marry into the Su family. After all, Su Li was more beautiful than Zipei. If she went to Yunjing, she would definitely get a rich husband and stabilize the position of the Su family. On one hand, it was his mother. On the other hand, it was the interests of the Su family. Su Huanli was in a dilemma. He only hoped that it could be delayed until Su Qingtan came back to solve the matter. At this moment, Zhu Yin had spread the news that the Su family was looking for a son-in-law, but she didn't say which daughter it was. The standard of choosing a son-in-law was even more shocking. What do you mean the worse the family situation is, the worse the character, the better? There is no age limit. Is it possible to find a husband for Su Zipei? After all, the Su family is the richest family in the Desa town. The conditions are too loose. The punks in the South Street alley were excited when they saw the notice. Letters of self-recommendation floated into the Su house like snowflakes. These movements naturally attracted Su Li's attention. What the hell are Zhu Yin and ma'am Su Chui doing? Fang Yuan looked worried and said in a stern voice, Are they choosing a son-in-law for you? They're so vicious. Su Li smiled lightly and said in a calm tone, Mother really has a lot of wicked ideas, but it is easy to solve this matter. I am afraid that you and Chu Qingning have to work hard. Fang Yuan felt strange. He had never seen such a bad relationship between the mother and the daughter. They were completely on the opposite side. Dr. Zhu repeatedly tried to put Su Li in a difficult situation. At the same time, in the Jinyuan court, Su Zipei took the paper and read it one by one. It seemed that she was very excited. She came to Ma'am Suchui from time to time and said, "Grandma, this is all so good." 3 generations of his ancestors were poor. This generation is so poor that they can't even eat. He is a real beggar. He is 40 years old. Ma'am Suchui shook her head and said, "Although he is qualified, his temper is not bad enough. He is not suitable." At this time, Zhu Yin came happily and said, "Mother, there is a candidate. He is from the Zhu family in the South Street alley. All the fathers of this family are gamblers, and they have the habit of beating their wives. All the women who married into this family were seriously injured and finally died of illness. I have inquired about it. There is a little son in this family who is just over 30 years old. No one dares to marry his daughter. Now he is still single." Su Zipei clapped her hands and said happily, "Grandma, this is the most suitable one. His family must be very poor. He has a bad temper and likes to beat his wife. If second sister marries him, she must be miserable. In this way, the life of the younger brother in mother's belly will be very good." Ma'am Suchui's eyes were also shining. She nodded and said, "I will send someone to talk with that family. Let them come to propose marriage tomorrow. It happens that Huanli will go out tomorrow. I will make the decision on behalf of him and directly agree." Hearing Ma'am Suchui's words, Zhu Yin and Su Zipei looked at each other and saw the joy in each other's eyes. This time's efforts were finally not in vain. In a smelly yard in the South Street alley, the mammy of the Su house pinched her nose and walked in to inform them. Then she immediately left the yard, as if she was running for her life. This smell was really suffocating. Ha 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 ha. The Su family really didn't lie. I also have a wife. The yellow-skinned man with a beard jumped up and rubbed the mud on his body. He showed the signature smile of a gambler and said, "I heard that the Su family has a dowry. When I marry the daughter of the Su family tomorrow, I will be very lucky. Then I will gamble again." Hey, hey, silly son. The casino gave you the name of Gambler Zhu. Do you really think that you are the god of gamblers? Zhu Yan's father staggered out with a drunken hiccup. He smiled obscenely and said, "If you don't take good care of your wife, I will make you a cuckold. Dad, what is mine is yours." The daughter of the Su family is married to the Zhu family. She is a member of the Zhu family. As the saying goes, if you marry a chicken, follow the chicken. If you marry a dog, follow the dog. We enjoy it together. What can the Su family say? Then Gambler Zhu laughed and was about to go out with a piece of silver that he had just robbed from the mammy of the Su family. Suddenly, a black shadow flashed in front of him. Ah! With the screams of an old man and a young man, the blood stained the courtyard wall, which was very enchanting. The next morning, Zhu Yin got up to dress up and waited for the Gambler Zhu's family to propose marriage. Ma'am Suchui also waited with a smile on her face. Even the dowry was properly prepared. When the sun was high up in the sky, no one came. Zhu Yin and Ma'am Suchui were not very good. They had already inquired about how bad the Gambler Zhu's family was. They did not expect that they could be late for the proposal. "Old lady, something bad happened." The mammy who sent the news yesterday ran in a panic. She knelt on the ground and said hurriedly, "The Gambler Zhu's family was cut into pieces in their own courtyard yesterday. I heard that the Gambler Zhu owed too much debt and was killed by the debt collectors." Hearing this, Zhu Yin and Ma'am Suchui were stunned and couldn't believe what they heard. Zhu Yan's face was gloomy. How could it be so coincidental? They just went to inform the Zhu family yesterday. Today, the Zhu family was killed. Damn it. If they had informed the Zhu family one day earlier, maybe Suli would have been married and killed by the debt collectors. She didn't need to worry about it. The Gambler Zhu's family was a rascal and was killed by the debt collectors. Although the news came abruptly, Ma'am Suchui and Zhu Yin didn't feel strange. This kind of thing happened on the South Street, since the most suitable candidate has been killed. Although Ma'am Suchui was angry, she was still calm and said, "Yin, go to bring the second-class family. I will have a look and decide the next candidate." Okay. Zhu Yin immediately returned to the room. There were many self-recommendation letters. It didn't matter if one was missing. In the byway building, Suli got the news and heard the familiar footsteps outside the door. She didn't look back and said, Fang Yuan, thank you this time. Fang Yuan came with a strange look inside. I would like to accept your gratitude, but when I went there, the Zhu family had all died. What? Su Li's eyes were slightly fixed, but she heard Fang Yuan said again. The person who killed them was extremely cruel. He cut the father and son of the Zhu family into 8 pieces. The whole yard was dyed red. I don't know what kind of deep hatred they had. However, the 2 people of the Zhu family were really bad. If I killed them, I would probably whip their corpses to vent my anger. Fang Yuan told the deeds of the Zhu family in detail that he had heard. Su Li's eyes were clear, and there seemed to be light flowing in them. Are you the one helping me in the dark? She wanted to ask him, but she didn't dare. Outside the valley, Ling Mo came with a cold face. He was surrounded by blood and was full of killing intent. Until he approached the entrance of the valley, Ling Mo took a deep breath. The blood in his eyes slowly receded, and he changed from the lord of the Shuelo cult to a cold teenager. Master, I'm back. Ling Li was eating the poison with difficulty. When he heard Ling Mo's voice, he immediately swallowed the rest of the poison. After flirting for a moment, he went downstairs and asked, "How is it?" Ling Mo frowned and couldn't help saying angrily, "Miss Su's biological mother is too much. She even wants Miss Su to marry a group of gamblers. That family doesn't know what shame is at all. It's simply a fire pit. Young master, I killed their entire family without authorization. Please punish me, young master." Ling Li's original order was to let Ling Mo warn the beggars and punks in the Desa town not to intervene in the marriage of the Su family. But Ling Mo was so angry that he directly killed them, which violated Ling Li's taboo. Ling Li was silent for a moment, but suddenly laughed and said, "You did a good job. Killing the chicken to warn the monkey can scare many people away, but it is not enough. Next, you have to do this." Chapter 62. The study of the Jinyuan court was full of self-recommendation letters. After a whole day's selection, Zhu Yin and Mam Su Chui were tired. However, they finally chose a suitable candidate. This person's temperament was worse than that of gambler Zhu. The 9th son of the Wang family has been farming for generations. His family has a meager income, but he lives a good life. The 9th son of the Wang family is 45 years old. He married 2 wives, but both of them were abused to death by him. However, few people know this news. They all think that the 9th son of the Wang family is unlucky. It is said in the letter by the 9th son of the Wang family. Ma'am. Su Chui and Zhu Yin nodded slightly and sent Mammy to contact the 9th son of the Wang family. Not long after, the old Mammy came back with a strange look and said hesitantly, "Old lady, madam, I went to the 9th son of the Wang family, but the 9th son of the Wang family did not admit that he sent the self-recommendation letter. He said that he was not interested in the Su family at all, and then he drove me out." Zhu Yin and Mam Su Chui were shocked again. It was difficult to find a good family for their children. Why was it so difficult to find a ruffian with a bad character? It was so strange. Ma'am. Su Chui held her crutch and said, "Su area is really a disaster. I don't believe it. Xiaoyan, send your nanny out as well. Go to all the suitable families." Zhu Yin was happy and understood that ma'am Su Chui was going to find a bad family for Su area regardless of the standard. In order to avoid trouble, she immediately sent all the mammies under her command. Such a situation made people in the Desu town laugh secretly. The reputation of the 3rd daughter of the Su family was so bad that even the 9th son of the Wang family was not willing to marry her. It was really ridiculous. Another day passed. Su area quietly watched the development of the situation. She just asked Fang Yuan to inquire about the news and did nothing else. She wanted to see how much that person could do for her. In the morning of the next day, the mammies who had been busy all night returned to the Su house one after another. They all looked very strange. "Old lady, it's strange. When the families that I went to saw me, they all looked at me as if they saw a ghost. They didn't admit that they had submitted the self-recommendation letter and didn't mention the marriage." "Oh, madam, it's the same here. There were a few houses where I couldn't even enter, and I was even pelted with stones. An old nanny covered her forehead and said angrily, "Old madam, the families I visited are all notorious scoundrels, but all of them had their legs broken. It was a miserable sight. When I mentioned marriage, she was so scared that she chased me out of the door." The more the old madam listened, the uglier her expression became. At the end, she was so angry that she grabbed the teacup beside her and smashed it on the ground. "I see. I was wondering why everything was so coincidental. It turns out that someone is helping that foxy woman." Zhu Yan's expression was also very bad. In the past 2 days, she sent someone to monitor Su Li. After knowing that Su Li didn't go out of the byway building, she was unable to stop her. Who was helping her? Zhu Yan was puzzled. Su Li was tortured by her since childhood, and she had no social circle at all. How could someone get the news at this time and help him secretly? Thinking of this, Su Li's amazing appearance suddenly appeared in Zhu Yan's mind. Could it be that he's a young master of some family? He's admired that lass for a long time and has always been paying attention to her. This time, he even helped her to stop my plan. The more Zhu Yan thought about it, the more likely it was. But Su Li was really too beautiful. In the Desu town, she was like a crane in a flock of chickens. It was difficult for her not to attract attention. There were too many people who admired her beauty. How about you guess who it was? For a moment, the room fell into an extremely awkward silence. Zhu Yan looked at the old mammies kneeling down. She was so angry that it almost rushed into her brain. She had painstakingly planned for so long, but she didn't expect that there would be such an accident. Was Su Arya really her nemesis? Things have come to this point. Don't mention marriage. "Ma'am." Su Chui smashed a teacup and seemed to calm down. She said, "Yin, don't be angry so as not to affect the fetus in your belly. I will find a way for you." "Then, ma'am," Su Chui sneered a few times, "if you want to make that wretched girl live a more miserable life, there are many other ways besides marrying someone. Why should she stick to a dead end?" Zhu Yan saw that, ma'am. Su Chui and Su Li were in conflict. She was happy and said, "That girl's luck can't be so good all the time. It's a pity that I have to take care of the fetus and can't help you." "Ma'am." Su Chui looked at Zhu Yan's slightly bulging belly and immediately became gentle. She said, "Leave it to me. Huanli doesn't help you, but I will." "Ma'am." Su Chui felt guilty when she thought that Zhu Yan couldn't get pregnant, and she had to let Su Huanli marry the second wife to continue the family line. Finally, Zhu Yan was pregnant, but she gave birth to Su Li, who was a loser. It was really annoying. She didn't blame Zhu Yan. Instead, she vented all her resentment on Su Li. It could be said that if ma'am Su Chui didn't stop Su Huanli from managing the affairs of the West Courtyard, Su Li would not be so miserable when she was a child. Later, Zhu Yan acted again and took the blame for Su Li, which made ma'am Su Chui's feeling towards Su Li directly rose from disgust to hatred. It could be said that even if Zhu Yan didn't find a witch to talk nonsense, ma'am Su Chui would try to deal with Su Li. Zhu Yan just gave her a reason. After the farce, everything seemed to be as usual. The whole Desu town began to spread the notoriety that Su Zipei couldn't get married, but Su Zipei was still kept in the dark. She didn't know that she lifted a stone and dropped it on her own feet. The business of the byway building was as usual. The reputation of the beggar's chicken gradually spread to several other towns. But because the means of transportation of the Su family were limited, and Su Li needed to earn extra money every 2 months, Su Huanli had no money to expand the business. Counting the time, Su Li estimated that Ling Li's poison had almost been detoxified. After finishing the business of the byway building that day, she came to the valley and smelled the wine. "It's the osmanthus wine." Su Li remembered that she ignored an extremely serious problem. She walked quickly to the yard and saw Ling Li holding the wine pot in his hand. There was an empty jar in the corner next to him. The wine had been bottomed out. Su Li's face instantly darkened. A whole jar of osmanthus wine was drunk by Ling Li in only a few days. Chu Qingning came in from behind. When he saw Su Li, who he hadn't seen for a long time, he immediately laughed and said, "Su Li, you've finally come." Hiccup, a burp suddenly came from his throat. Chu Qingning hurriedly covered his mouth and turned to run away. It turns out that the wine I made is spoiled in this way. Su Li's tone was very calm, but Ling Li heard the anger in it. He straightened up and waved away the smell of alcohol. He smiled cheekily and said, I made a lot of wine for you, and I also taught those boys how to make wine. This jar of wine is my reward. How about it? Su Li was silent and stared at Ling Li's face, which had almost recovered to fair. An inexplicable atmosphere slowly spread. Ling Li's smile became more and more stiff. Shouldn't this girl be angry? Could it be that she poisoned the wine? Have you taken medicine today? When Ling Li was thinking, Su Li suddenly broke the silence. Ling Li nodded subconsciously when he heard the words. Before he responded, he was pulled out of the yard. The sudden skin contact made Ling Li's ears red. He was quite angry and said, What are you going to do? I really took the medicine. Su Li didn't speak all the way. Under the shocked gaze of all the minions, they went up to the bamboo building. What on earth are you going to do? Ling Li shook off Su Li's hand. His cultivation was still sealed, so he staggered and fell on the bed, which made his face redder. What was wrong with Su Li today? Su Li glanced at her right hand, which was shaken off, and said lightly, Of course, I know that you take medicine every day. Otherwise, your skin color can't recover to this extent. Today is the last day to cure the poison. I will make the poison you will take today. Then, Su Li ignored Ling Li and turned to concentrate on the pharmacology. Ling Li sat up and looked at Su Li's back. Suddenly, he felt that this scene was very familiar. It seemed that there was such a person a long time ago. She accompanied him every day, took care of him, and cooked for him. Cooked? Bah! Ling Li's face suddenly turned pale. What was in Su Li's hand now was not a dish, but a real poison. Was he infected by Su Li? How could he have such an absurd idea? My previous life was not in this world at all, and there was no such person. Ling Li shook his head and shook off the miscellaneous thoughts. At this moment, Su Li turned around and held a whole bottle of colorful muddy liquid in her hand. Ling Li's face changed immediately. The taste of this liquid must not be good. Drink it. Su Li handed the glass bottle to Ling Li with a cold face. Ling Li glanced at her in different expression and hesitated for a moment. Then he took it and drank it. Gudong, gudong. After drinking it all at once, Ling Li frowned. Bitter. It was extremely bitter. He didn't let the poison stay in his mouth for a long time, but it still completely numbed his taste, leaving only unbearable bitterness. Su Li was expressionless, but her eyes were full of tension. She observed Ling Li's reaction without a blink. After a while, the bitterness in his mouth faded away. Ling Li sat cross-legged on the bed and began to wait for the reaction in his pubic region. Every time he took the poison, his stomach was like a tumbling sea, and there was a sharp pain. The sharp pain seemed that someone was pulling the 5 viscera out from the outside. It was extremely painful. But what kind of person was Ling Li? Although the pain was severe, it was not the limit he could bear. This time, he made up his mind not to make a fool of himself in front of Su Li. However, the situation was obviously different the last time. Ling Li waited for a long time, but he didn't feel anything. When he was about to ask, he suddenly felt that his whole body was like falling into an ice cave, and cold air came out. It's so cold. Is it the cold poison? Ling Li couldn't help curling up together. His eyebrows were instantly covered with a layer of frost, and his lips were frozen purple. There was a thin layer of ice on the surface of his body. What's going on? Ling Li wanted to look up at Su Li's expression, but found that even his eyeballs were frozen and could not move. His viscera seemed to be sunk into the glacier of thousands of years. He felt that his body was slowly stiffening, and it would not take long for him to be frozen to death. Ling Li couldn't breathe when he opened his mouth. He forced a bitter smile and said, "Well, you really want to kill." At this moment, a bloody lip blocked Ling Li's mouth, which immediately made him widen his eyes and show an unprecedented dull expression. He, the dignified killer Ling and the supreme existence of the Yinma cult, was actually kissed by a miss of a small town here. At the same time, Ling Li also felt that the liquid passed by Su Li flowed through his tendons and veins like magma, and the hard ice on his body immediately began to melt. The bamboo house was steaming, and the smoke was lingering like the mist of a hot spring. It turns out that the last day is like this to detoxify. This thought flashed through Ling Li's mind. Suddenly, he felt that the last bit of poison in his body was burned into nothingness, and the cultivation seal was automatically unlocked. Chapter 63. The extremely horrible momentum broke out from the bamboo building and directly lifted the roof of the bamboo building. Su Li was the first to bear the brunt. She groaned and blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. But she still didn't let go of Ling Li and continued to pass more hot liquid to him. Ling Li tasted the sweet taste in his mouth. He was shocked and immediately restrained his momentum. Su Li could hardly open her eyes. She barely passed the last secret medicine. Her hand loosened and she completely fainted. Ling Li immediately hugged Su Li. He felt complicated. He thought that he suspected that Su Li wanted to kill him before and felt more guilty. At this time, there were several sounds of breaking the air. Chu Qingning and Ling Mo came first. They were both dumbfounded when they saw Ling Li holding Su Li. What happened? Ling Li blushed and explained reluctantly. Su Li treated me and was hurt by accident. Don't think too much. Ling Mo scratched his head and didn't know where to look. He turned his head and saw Chu Qingning, who was also embarrassed. They laughed awkwardly at the same time and said in unison, "I'll clean up the bamboo building. You go to clean up the yard." Now, the atmosphere was even more awkward. Ling Li snorted and left with Su Li in his arms. He said without looking back, "Both of you go to clean up the bamboo building." In the room of the yard, Ling Li carefully put Su Li on the bed and covered her with a quilt. Then he gently wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. But his mind drifted far away. In the past month, he doubted the purpose of Su Li's detoxification more than once. He didn't expect that he measured the heart of a gentleman with his own mean measure and finally hurt Su Li. Ling Li ran the cultivation in his body slightly and suddenly became stagnant. Why did he break through to the inborn 8th hurdle? He was at the peak of the inborn 6th hurdle before he was injured. How could he break through to the inborn 8th hurdle in just 1 month? Ling Li recalled the poisons he ate these days and the pain he suffered every time. He suddenly realized it. He looked at Su Li's sleeping face again and murmured, "You did it on purpose. You deliberately used the blood poison as a guide to help me improve my cultivation, but you didn't explain anything." Ling Li felt more and more complicated. What made Su Li do this for him? Staring at Su Li, who slept more peacefully and even smiled warmly, Ling Li subconsciously felt jealous. What did she see in her dream? She was so happy. She never smiled at me. Ling Li seemed to be fascinated, quietly guarding Su Li. Suddenly, he leaned over and stretched out his hand. He hesitated for a while and touched Su Li's face gently like a thief. So smooth, she is only 15 years old, 1 year younger than this body of mine. Ling Li was indulging in flights of fancy and suddenly felt something wrong. He suddenly looked up and found that Su Li's face was slowly changing, becoming more and more beautiful, more and more dazzling, more and more beautiful. Ling Li was so surprised that he opened his mouth slightly. This is nothing unusual. Ling Li suddenly felt angry. They had known each other for a whole month, but this girl didn't show her true face. At the same time, he was secretly delighted. Could it be that he was the only one who saw this face? No, nothing extraordinary was an extremely precious disguise technique, and her poison technique could not be self-taught. There must be an unfathomable master standing behind him, but no matter how powerful he was, he couldn't possibly be my opponent. Well, why should I compare who is stronger and who is weaker? Did I fall in love with this girl? Ling Li's mind was in a mess, and his state of mind was even worse than that of the acquired senior. Ling Mo stood outside the door like a robot, not daring to peek or let anyone in. The momentum just now, Master must have broken through the inborn 7th hurdle. Master was really a genius to reach the inborn 7th hurdle at the age of 16. After 2 hours, Su Li's eyebrows trembled and she was about to open her eyes. Ling Li saw it and immediately left the room. At the moment when Ling Li left, Su Li opened her eyes, sat up and rubbed her eyebrows, which were still in pain. I fainted. Thinking of what happened in the bamboo building before, Su Li immediately got up and got out of bed. She walked to the door and touched her face. Suddenly, she realized something and immediately ran, nothing extraordinary again. Then she opened the door and walked out. Hearing the sound of opening the door, Ling Li immediately pretended to turn his head and breathed a sigh of relief. You finally wake up. Su Li saw that there was no abnormality on everyone's face, so she was relieved and asked, "How long did I faint?" "Only 2 hours, and it's still early." Chu Qingning replied and kept looking at Ling Li and Su Li. What happened just now? How could the roof of the bamboo building be lifted? Su Li shook her head and said, "The last step of detoxification was a little noisy. Fortunately, it was successful. Ling Li, how do you feel now?" Ling Li was suddenly called. He was shocked and said, "The poison has been detoxified. Sorry to bother you." Such a tone immediately surprised Ling Mo, who knew the details of his master. Did the master really fall in love with Su Li? Su Li nodded slightly and took out a black porcelain bottle from her waist. She poured out a black elixir and said, "Eat it." Ling Li took it and swallowed it without asking. He didn't want to let Su Li down again. But after he ate it, he saw Su Li with a strange look and asked, "Don't you ask what it is?" Ling Li laughed loudly and said, "Is it poison? I believe you." Su Li's expression suddenly became more strange. Ling Li's face changed, and he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his heart. It was a symptom of poisoning. Clang! Ling Mo unsheathed his long sword and pointed at Su Li with a murderous look. "Give me the antidote." Chu Qingning immediately looked cold and stood in front of Su Li. Ling Li covered his chest and frowned. He couldn't figure out why Su Li just helped him detoxify and gave him poison again. Su Li looked indifferent and put her hands behind her. She looked at Ling Li's body, which was bent because of the pain. If she wanted to succeed, she must have the capital. She worked hard for a month and spent 100,000 taels of silver, which was to increase the capital for Ling Li. Suddenly, Ling Li felt that the pain in his body receded like the tide and returned to the original state in an instant. He didn't seem to be poisoned at all. Ling Mo was also stunned and slowly took back his long sword. He couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Miss Su Li really liked to play pranks. "You lied to me again." Ling Li dried his sweat and smiled bitterly. After getting along with her for a month, he completely figured out what the girl wanted to do. Every time he thought he had understood Su Li's purpose, he was slapped in the face at the speed of light. It was the first time in his life that he couldn't control the feeling. "I didn't lie to you." Su Li slowly put away the black porcelain bottle and said, "What I gave you is indeed extremely poisonous, more poisonous than the blood poison. It was your body that decomposed the poison by itself. It had nothing to do with me." Ling Li was stunned and didn't say anything. After a long time, he said with doubt, "The body of immunity to all poisons? It's not that exaggerated." Su Li didn't seem to be proud at all. She said, "At most, it can detoxify 90% of the poisons in the world. If you are poisoned, you still have to come to me in person. It turns out that you have been letting me take poison for this reason." Ling Li's eyes became more and more complicated. He guessed wrong again. It turned out that helping him to improve his cultivation was just incidental. The real purpose was this magical physique. The body of immunity to all poisons was the physique that all warriors in the martial arts circle dreamed of. If they could have it, their survival ability would be greatly improved. Ling Li had also looked for the secret prescription of the body of immunity to all poisons, but he couldn't find it. He didn't expect that it would be realized by Su Li. "Don't look at me like that. I just don't want to see that the person I saved is poisoned to death one day." Su Li smiled and said, "It's a great insult to me." Ling Li touched his chest. He got so many benefits from Su Li in this month that he didn't know how to thank her. Was it because of what she had done in the previous life that she did this to compensate him? Ling Li was struggling. He was silent for a long time and didn't ask. Instead, he took out a cyan jade token with a warm texture from his arms and put it in Su Li's hand. He said, "If you have any difficulties, you can go to any Tinya house with this token. Then, you could dispatch all my people at will." Master, Ling Imo saw that Ling Li actually gave this token. His face suddenly changed, and he couldn't help but speak. But he was stopped by Ling Li's stern look. Su Li looked at the cyan jade token in her hand and was lost in thought. She had seen half of it in the previous life with her disabled husband. In this life, it was complete. Even if she couldn't find him, it was good to leave a memory. Thinking of this, Su Li put away the jade token and said indifferently, "You have a little conscience. If I have no food one day, I will pawn it for money." Ling Li knew that Su Li was joking, but he still didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Ling Imo shook his head. In his opinion, Su Li definitely didn't know the power of the jade token. Otherwise, she couldn't be so calm. This was the jade token that could dispatch all the members of the Inma cult, the Shuelo cult, and the Tinya house. Seeing the jade token was like seeing the hierarch. There was only one in the world. Since Ling Li said that he would leave tomorrow, Su Li didn't go to the Bai Chao Tang. Instead, she ate a table of good dishes in the yard. Ling Imo, Chu Qingning, and others couldn't stop eating. Ling Li took the chopsticks and picked up a piece of chicken, but he felt it was difficult to swallow. Su Li saw that the haze in his eyes increased. Ling Imo didn't see the abnormality of the two people. At this moment, he had completely integrated into the ranks of grabbing food. Although he was now noble, he was just a little beggar who grabbed food from wild dogs when he was a child. How could such delicious food be wasted? "Don't grab. Leave some for me." Chu Qingning wanted to cry, but had no tears. He had been pampered since he was a child. He had never experienced such a scene. Finally, the dishes on the table were cleared out after a few bites. Putting down the bowl and chopsticks, Su Li got up and walked to the door. She turned back and said, "Ling Li, come out with me." Ling Li was stiff and slowly got up. Was she going to tell the truth? His heart fluctuated for a moment. Suddenly, he calmed down and followed Su Li out. "What's wrong with the two people?" Chu Qingning looked confused and said, "It seems that Feng Yuan is in danger. Ling Li is obviously interested in Su Li. Tut tut." Chu Qingning gloated a little. Then he immediately thought of the girl who was lost in the war and felt melancholy. Outside the valley, the cold wind was blowing gently. There were signs of winter. In the blink of an eye, Su Li had been reborn for nearly a year. Under her careful management, the situation was finally completely different from that of the previous life. Ling Li looked at the stars in the sky and sighed in his heart. He had come to this world for 16 years unconsciously. "What do you want to ask?" The wind blew her hair. Su Li turned around, and her expression was unclear. But Ling Li could feel the inexplicable firmness of the girl. "I'm afraid that you will be angry if I ask." Ling Li shrugged and said half-jokingly, "What if you are angry and poison me again? I have no money." Su Li stared at Ling Li honestly and said, "All the money is spent on your physique. I don't have money to poison you. You can ask me." Ling Li remembered that Su Li had a surplus of tens of thousands of taels of silver. He was stunned for a moment. He suppressed the throbbing in his heart and took a deep breath. He said, "A long time ago, there was a person. In order to protect her, I killed countless people. In order to stabilize the position of the head of the family, I was willing to give up everything." She could also make wine. The osmanthus wine was my favorite. She could also make good dishes. The dishes she made were my favorite. Ling Li gradually immersed in the memory, but he didn't find that Su Li's eyes were getting colder and colder. She could also refine poison. Few people in the world could detoxify the poison. In the end, she poisoned me with her own hands. I don't know what I owe her. I don't know what resentment she had in her heart. I don't know whether she came here like me. Until I met you, I gradually began to doubt your identity. Chapter 64. The sound of the wind disappeared at this moment, and there was a terrible silence. Ling Li looked into the girl's dark eyes, and his heart couldn't help beating wildly. He was almost 80% sure about the identity of the girl in front of him, but when he saw Su Li's reaction, he suddenly felt cold. Su Li's eyes were dim. A moment of confusion flashed through her eyes. After a moment of silence, she suddenly made an inexplicable self-mockery. Who is Shui? Who is she to you? Ling Li's heart thumped. Wasn't she? He wanted to see any trace of pretense from Su Li's face, but he was disappointed. Su Li let out a series of low laughter, and her calm tone was brewing a strong magma-like anger. I have done so much, but you think I am Shui? Ling Li didn't realize the seriousness of the matter. He coughed twice and said, Don't get me wrong. I just asked casually. Since you're not her, forget it. Before he finished his words, Ling Li saw the girl throw something over. He subconsciously took it and opened his palm. His face immediately darkened. This was the hierarch's token that he had just given out. Then, the girl's voice sounded, and the tone was calm and peaceful. Hierarch Ling must have an ulterior motive to give me this jade pendant. Now that you know that I am not her, I can't take this jade pendant. Hierarch, have an early rest today and leave tomorrow. Speaking of this, Su Li smiled lightly. She was no longer moody and rude. Instead, she waved her hand gracefully. Goodbye, Ling Li. Seeing Su Li turned around without reluctance and slowly disappeared on the valley path, Ling Li was in a daze. He suddenly felt that he seemed to have lost something very important. He wanted to ask Su Li to turn back, but he racked his brains and couldn't find any reason to make her turn back. She was just a pretty girl from a humble family in the Desa town, while he was in a precarious situation. It seemed that he had a bright future, but in fact, every step he took was on the edge of a knife. Why should he drag her into trouble and put her in danger? Maybe I shouldn't think too much. The fate is over. Ling Li glanced at the jade pendant in his hand and silently put it away. The deep sigh slowly disappeared in the night. The next morning, Su Li rushed over and didn't see Ling Li and Ling Mo again. It seemed that this month was just a dream. Now they woke up and left without leaving any trace. Su Li, are you stupid? Why did you return the jade token? That's good stuff. Seeing Su Li coming, Chu Qingming said with pity, That is the young master of the Yinma cult. His personal jade token must be very powerful. You were so stupid to return the jade token. Su Li shook her head slightly. Even if we take it, we don't need it. It's better not to take it. What you said seems to make sense. Chu Qingming said and took out a wooden token and handed it to Su Li, but Ling Li didn't think so. You didn't accept the jade token, so he gave you this wooden token. Although it is not as powerful as the jade token, it can also mobilize people of the Yinma cult in Qinghai province. Su Li narrowed her eyes and hesitated for a moment. She took the wooden token and put it close to her body. Without saying anything, she turned around and left the valley. Chu Qingming scratched his head and couldn't help but say to himself, I really don't understand. What's wrong with him? 3 days later, a luxurious carriage passed by on the smooth, official road. Ling Li put on the jade bone mask again. Through the gap of the curtain, it could be seen that Ling Mo, who was driving the carriage, wore a bamboo hat and gray linen clothes, which was the standard dress of a coachman. Master, we will arrive in Yunjing City in 2 days. Ling Li said, lightly absent-mindedly. He touched his lips with his fingertips, as if there was still a little softness on that day. He thought that he would not think about it when he stopped thinking about it. But he found that even if he didn't think about it, the temperamental and slightly barbaric petite figure would appear in his mind from time to time. Distracting thoughts. Su Li, it only took you a month to replace Shui as my new devil in mind. There was another sigh in the carriage. Ling Mo twitched his mouth and showed a little strange. Since the master left the valley, he seemed to be a little abnormal. Was he infected by the crazy woman? In his short life of more than 10 years, he had never had contact with a woman. When it came to understanding women, he was even worse than Ling Li. In his eyes, the temperamental Su Li became a real crazy woman. On the second day after Ling Li left, Su Li completely returned to normal. Her daily schedule was full, and she was very busy. Compared with Ling Li, she knew more about what was going to happen in this life. She was more clear about the urgency of time and didn't allow her to waste time to be sad. It was worth mentioning that when she detoxified the poison for Ling Li that day, she was impacted, which led to several cracks in the bottleneck. Because of these cracks, Su Li saved 3 months of hard practice and broke through to the inborn first hurdle in advance. The impurities were removed from the body after the marrow cleansing. The bones in her body were as clear as jade, just like the high-quality chalcedony. It could be seen that the pure and flawless blood ran through the tendons and vessels. After washing off the overflowing dirt, Su Li found that her skin became more delicate and white. It was as smooth as congealed fat, and it was cool and moist. Is this the ice skin and jade skin? Su Li thought for a while. It was said that the ice skin and jade skin was the talent physique pursued by every woman in the martial arts circle. With this physique, women would get twice the result with half the effort and many benefits when they practiced the Ina tribute martial arts. She stumbled to the inborn hurdle alone in the previous life. Of course, she didn't have such benefits. Now she accidentally opened the ice skin and jade skin, but she still needed time to understand it. After the breakthrough, Su Li had new insights in cooking, cultivation, and medical circle. This was a gift from heaven and earth. During this period, inspiration burst out constantly. No matter what Su Li did, she was extremely efficient. She originally enjoyed it very much, but a month later, she found that something was wrong. Because she had almost read all the books collected by Qi Xianqing. Qi Xianqing also had a premonition that the time of leaving this time would not be too short, so he left a lot of books for Su Li to read by herself. However, he misjudged the progress of Su Li's Xiangong, and the more than enough books had been finished. When Su Li was thinking, Mammy Li suddenly rushed in from the door and said happily, "Miss, great news!" Su Li came to her sense and was about to ask in detail. There was another figure behind Mammy Li. It was Su Huanli, who hadn't seen her for a long time. "Li, how are you living in the Baiwei building? I really wronged you." Su Huanli's tone was extremely affectionate and full of guilt. "Today, I come here to send you the student letter." "Admission?" Su Li's beautiful eyes showed doubts. "Daddy, what is the student letter?" "You see, I don't know when Mr. Qi will come back. I'm also afraid of delaying your studies. You might as well go to the girls' school in Muyang Town to make do. It is the best girls' school in the nearby town. The teaching conditions there are only a little worse than the girls' school in Qinghai province." "I see." Su Li nodded and looked a little moved. She said, "I didn't expect that when you are busy, you still care about your daughter's affairs. You're really tired." "Huh?" Su Huanli heard it and laughed. "Don't thank me. This is proposed by your grandma. Maybe because she felt guilty for driving you out of the house last time, she took the initiative to mention you to me today, which really surprised me." "Oh." Su Li was slightly moved. She knew the old woman's temperament. It was absolutely not a good arrangement. There must be a trap waiting for her. "I am afraid that you will delay the business of the Baiwei building, so I specially prepared a faster carriage for you. Zipei will also go with you. She can take care of you." Su Huanli seemed to have arranged everything for her. Obviously, Su Li couldn't refuse. She didn't know what guarantee he got from Mam. Su Chui, he worked so hard. Su Li accepted the student letter and nodded to thank Su Huanli. Su Huanli left with relief. He didn't expect that this trip was so easy. Fortunately, he got part of the land of the old house from his mother. After Su Huanli left, Mammy Li quietly walked into the room. She didn't look happy and said with worry, "Miss, since it is the order of the old lady, I am afraid that there is a trap. You should be careful." Su Li glanced at Mammy Li and sneered in her heart. Even Mammy Li could easily see it, but Su Huanli pretended to be confused. He was really her good father. Thinking so in her heart, Su Li smiled and said, "It happens that I have read almost all the books left by the master. It is good to go to the Muyang girls' school. Mammy, don't think too much. It is a place where the ladies of the scholarly families gather. There will be no dirty things. Don't worry." "Is that so?" Mammy Li was confused. She was not educated. Hearing Su Li's words, she immediately believed it. She murmured, "The old lady has a conscience. I can't believe it." On the other side, Zhu Yan, who was nourishing the fetus in the Su house, heard the news. She was also indignant and hurried to find Ma'am. Su Chui. Mother, I can understand that you arranged a girls' school for Zipei. Why did you arrange a girls' school for Area? Yes, Grandma. Su Zipei also chimed in and said with grievance, Grandma, didn't you say that you would not let Area live a good life? Why did you spend money to send her to the girls' school? Ma'am. Su Chui smiled happily and touched Su Zipei's little head. She said, You are not like a madam and a miss of a noble family. You should learn to be calm in the face of trouble. I have already arranged the girls' school. Of course, I will arrange it. Speaking of this, ma'am, Su Chui looked serious and said, I didn't expect that in just half a year, Area became a talented girl in the mouth of the people in the Desu town. When I went out, I heard that the second miss of the Su family was talented and beautiful. I can't easily hurt her because of her reputation. Otherwise, it will have an impact on the Su family. Su Zipei's eyes brightened. She said, So, Grandma, you arrange her to go to the girls' school. If she makes a fool of herself in the girls' school, it will be easy to deal with it. Zipei is so smart. Ma'am. Su Chui laughed more happily, as if she had already seen Su Li's embarrassing appearance because of her. The next morning, the carriage to the girls' school stopped early at the gate of the byway building. Su Li took the dictionary of Dahan, whose cover was dyed black. She didn't take anything else and got into the carriage. Su Zipei had been waiting in the carriage for a long time. When she saw Su Li coming in, she couldn't help but snort. When she saw the black cover in Su Li's hand, she immediately sneered and said, Second sister, why do you still use this dictionary? It has been dyed black by ink. It's better to throw it away and change another one. As she said, she showed off the bookcase beside her. There was a brand new and shiny dictionary of Dahan in it. It was the latest edition that she had just bought. Su Li smiled and shook her head. She said, Thank you for your concern, third sister. This is enough for me. Although the cover is black, the inside is not polluted. No matter how good the cover of the dictionary is, you still can't read the whole book overnight. Su Zipei was so angry that her beautiful eyes widened. She screamed and scolded, Su Li, don't be arrogant. This is the girls' school that my grandma arranged for me. You are just a maid incidentally. When we go to the school later, remember to hold the bookcase for me. Otherwise, I will make you unable to enter the gate of the girls' school. Su Li didn't say anything. It seemed that she was afraid and didn't refute. Chapter 65. The carriage galloped all the way. Su Li and Su Zipei finally arrived at the Muyang town before 7 a.m. The area of the Muyang town was 3 times larger than that of the Desa town. It was a veritable big town. Its prosperity was far greater than that of the Desa town. This was also the reason why the Muyang Girls' School could become the first girls' school after the Qinghe Girls' School. Su Zipei carefully opened the curtain. She was full of novelty, like a village woman entering the city. When pedestrians saw her expression, they couldn't help but snigger. Su Zipei reacted and hurriedly put down the curtain. Her face was very red. She pretended that nothing had happened and peeped at Su Li. However, she saw that Su Li was resting with her eyes closed. She didn't open the curtain at all. Fortunately, she didn't see me. While she was thinking about it, the coachman's voice suddenly sounded from outside. Miss, we have arrived at the girls' school. Su Zipei quickly tidied up a well-dressed dress, opened the curtain, and walked down. Su Li glanced at the book cylinder still in front of her. She slowly took out all the things in the book cylinder and then walked down the carriage with the empty book cylinder. What came into view was a square. The surrounding field of vision was wide. Flowers of various colors were blooming in the flower bed. Red bricks and green tiles could be faintly seen in the dense forest. This is the Muyang Girls' School. The houses are so beautiful. There are so many flowers in the flower bed that I have never seen before. I am so lucky to enter the Muyang Girls' School. In addition to Su Li and Su Zipei, there were many well-dressed misses in the square. All of them had outstanding temperament. At this moment, they whispered in groups of 3 or 5. Their words were full of admiration for the Muyang Girls' School. Su Li held the book cylinder in her hand and didn't dress very luxuriously. Many maids held the book cylinder in their arms and subconsciously regarded Su Li as a maid like them. They whispered in private, "Who is she? She doesn't look like a maid from her dress. But why is she holding the book cylinder in her hand? I am afraid that she is the maid of the mist next to her." Su Zipei listened to these and felt a sense of success. However, Su Li's expression didn't change. She still held the book cylinder and looked around. Not long after, a middle-aged woman in a navy blue palace dress came slowly. Her posture was very elegant and her voice was clear. "I'm Lecturer Ning of the Muyang School. All the students who are enrolled today come to me and hand in their admission letters in turn." When the voice came out, a group of girls immediately rushed to Lecturer Ning. Su Zipei wanted to catch up with them, but Su Li slowed down. Su Zipei was so angry that her face was slightly pale. But because the book cylinder was still in Su Li's hand, she could only slow down. The speed at which the admission letters were checked was very slow. The procession had only gone through a small part of the procession when it was already noon. A group of pampered young ladies showed impatience on their faces. Several of them sent their maids forward to inquire, but they were stopped by the academy's steward. Su Zipei was extremely annoyed. If it weren't for Su Li, she might have gone in. Why did he have to suffer under the sun here? His skin was almost tanned. These impetuous young ladies didn't notice that Lecturer Ning was looking at them. The test began from the first step of entering the Muyang School, and most of these ignorant young ladies had not noticed it. Finally, Lecturer Ning's eyes fell on several people, and she nodded slightly. Because Su Li was carrying the book cylinder, she was mistakenly regarded as a maid. Lecturer Ning's eyes never stayed on her for a moment. After looking at them, Lecturer Ning sped up. The procession was shortened quickly. Soon it was Su Zipei's turn. Su Zipei took out a neatly folded admission letter from her arms and handed it to Lecturer Ning respectfully. Lecturer Ning slightly nodded, thinking that although this girl was a little impetuous, she was modest and polite, which was not bad. Next, the steward shouted loudly. At the same time, he stepped aside to let Su Zipei enter the gate. Suddenly, he frowned. Seeing that Su Li didn't go in, he couldn't help but scold. "What are you doing? Hurry up and go in with you, miss." Su Zipei saw this scene inside and laughed happily. She expected Su Li to show her anger and directly annoy Lecturer Ning, but she was disappointed. Su Li smiled slightly and shook her head. She said calmly, "Steward, I am not a maid, but a student who comes to enter the school." The steward was stunned when he heard that. Seeing that Su Li had taken out the admission letter, he was more embarrassed. He cursed in his heart. How could she come to the school without a maid? Which miss is so embarrassed? Lecturer Ning was also secretly surprised. She took the admission letter and unfolded it. It was Su Li from the Su family. It turned out to be her. Lecturer Ning frowned secretly. She didn't pay attention to the girl's expression and reaction because of the misunderstanding. She miscalculated. "You go in. Next time, let your sister take the book cylinder by herself." Her eyesight was so sharp that she looked back at Su Zipei, who was gloating. She immediately understood the ins and outs of the matter. Su Zipei was as narrow-minded as rumored. She liked to play small tricks. It was really difficult for her to enter the Hall of Elegance. Su Li chuckled and didn't hide the situation inside the book cylinder. She said, "I just hope my sister doesn't blame me." When Lecturer Ning saw that the book cylinder was empty, she was even more surprised. Then a trace of appreciation flashed through her eyes. She didn't teach weak and incompetent people. If they were bullied, they should retaliate immediately. Obviously, Su Li's approach was very to her taste. After entering the school, they were led by the supervisor. Su Li and others soon came to a classroom. Without any delay, the first lesson of Muyang School began quickly. Sitting behind the teacher's desk was an old teacher with gray hair. He held a wooden ruler in his hand and looked stern. "You are all misses from big families in the nearby towns. Today's first lesson is the foundation of literacy. It is also the first test. According to your literacy level, you will be divided into different classes. Now, open your dictionary of the hand." As soon as the old teacher finished his words, there was a neat sound under the podium. All the misses put the Dictionary of Dahan on the table. When Suli took out the pitch-black Dictionary of Dahan, it immediately caused a burst of laughter. What the hell is this? Dictionary of Dahan? It seems that there is no such version. Is it possible that she bought a pirated version printed on the street? The room immediately became noisy. The old teacher frowned and fiercely patted the table twice. He shouted, "Silence!" The whole scene immediately became quiet. Everyone was as silent as cicadas in winter. They almost forgot that they were not in the school at home. The old teacher snorted coldly and looked at Suli coldly. "You, stand up and answer. I asked you to take out the Dictionary of Dahan. What did you take out?" Suli stood up and said in a respectful tone without fear, "Sir, this is indeed the Dictionary of Dahan printed by the government. But the ink on the cover is broken. There is no pollution inside. I am reluctant to throw it away, so I keep it with me." As she said, Suli opened the first page, which was densely covered with small footnotes. The rich miss next to her widened her eyes. The old teacher found the abnormality and was curious. He couldn't help but say, "Let me have a look." Suli immediately handed it to the manservant. When the old teacher got the Dictionary of Dahan, his turbid eyes couldn't help but brighten. He turned it page by page, but he found that every page was covered with footnotes. Until the last page, he felt that the footnotes were sparse. "Good." The old teacher smiled and praised her generously. "What's your name?" "My name is Suli. Su as in Gusu and Li as in Leanly." "Good. You don't have to take part in this test. You can directly go to class, say." The old teacher directly made the decision. Suli raised her eyebrows and thought that the old teacher was really bold. Other people had already been stunned. Class A was the best literacy class for cultivating girls in Muyang. It was said that half of the people in it could become female officials of the imperial court. How could Suli take out a black book and directly go there without doing anything? What was different about that black book? Suzy Pei sat aside and felt jealous and regretful. If she had known that Suli's book was so useful, she would have grabbed it earlier. "Damn it. Why?" "Sir, I don't accept it." The atmosphere was silent for a moment. Finally, someone couldn't help standing up and shouting. They were all the pearls of their families. They strived to do the best in everything. How could they allow someone to climb over their heads without doing anything? Even if you don't accept it, you have to accept it. This is my classroom, the Muyang school, not your home. The old teacher stared and was obviously angry. He said, "If you don't care about my teaching, you can leave." As soon as the words came out, the face of the miss who stood up changed from green to white. It was very ugly. At this time, Suli spoke. "Sir, I don't want to cause criticism. I believe that I can enter Class A with my own strength. Please treat me equally." Hearing that, the old teacher immediately smiled and said, "Good. I approve. You continue to sit down and take the test." The miss who stood up also breathed a sigh of relief and sat down slowly. Although Suli helped her out of trouble, she didn't feel grateful at all. Instead, she felt that Suli was hypocritical and really annoying. After the disturbance, Suzy Pei looked around and found that everyone used the same Dictionary of Dahan as Suli. They didn't buy the latest version. She immediately felt happy and opened the book tube to put her hand in. As soon as she put her hand in, the smile on Suzy Pei's face disappeared instantly, and her face became pale. "This book tube, when was it empty? What are you doing?" The old teacher's stern words suddenly appeared in her ears. Suzy Pei trembled and looked up. She saw the old teacher standing in front of her. She was so scared that she shrank back and fell directly from the seat. The old teacher's face was strange. He bent down to pick up the book tube, but his hand was light. He made a sound of surprise and opened it. He immediately became angry. "Well, I have been teaching for many years, but it is the first time that I see a student who comes to class without a book. Get out of here. You are not allowed to take the test this time. Go to Class Gue tomorrow and start from the beginning." Class Gue was the last of the 10 heavenly stems. It was easy to imagine what Class Gue was like. Suzy Pei was suddenly stunned by the scolding, and her mind was in a mess. She clearly remembered that she had filled the book tube. How could it be empty? Along the way, Suli clearly took it well. "Wait a minute. Suli, you hurt me." Su Zipei suddenly screamed through the air like a ghost, which scared the old teacher. He angrily called a manservant to drag Su Zipei out. How dare you? How dare you? How dare you make a noise in the school? Who allowed such a student to come in? You are just a rat's shit. The old teacher was so angry that he even said rat's shit. Obviously, he was dizzy because of Su Zipei's barbaric behavior. Su Li sat in the same place, looking down and waiting for the test to begin. Next, the whole test seemed to be calm. Every time the manservant reported the number of pages and lines of a dictionary of Dahan, Su Li was always the first to say it. The old teacher's anger was almost gone. When he looked at Su Li, he smiled again. Although the students accepted this year were a mix of good and bad, there were still surprises. This little girl had some skills. When she entered the Jia class, he would definitely teach her well. Next, announce the class list. Su Li, Class Jia. Mei Ru Han, Class Bing. Except that Su Li was in Class Jia, there was no one in Class B. There was only one in Class C, which was the girl who sat beside Su Li with a shocked look. Most of the others were in Class D and Class E. Chapter 66. After the class, Su Li was directly called away by the old teacher, which made everyone in the classroom envious. Su Li followed the old teacher to a ventilated tea house. The old teacher didn't put on airs. He let Su Li sit down and said with a smile, "Little girl, your name is Su Li, right?" "Yes, sir." Su Li sat respectfully and said in a gentle tone, "It was my younger sister who was driven out by you. My sister was spoiled by my mother since she was a child. Please don't mind." Ha ha ha. Seeing that Su Li said it so straightforwardly, the old teacher didn't want to ask about the booktube. He changed the topic and asked, "I read your annotations on the dictionary of Dahan. Every word is a gem. Some insights even I can't understand. I'm afraid that you have a very good teacher before. May I know his name?" "My teacher is Qi Xianqing. He is a doctor of the Bai Chao Tang in the town. I don't know his specific background." Su Li asked tentatively, but the old teacher was directly stunned and said, "It turned out to be that person." Sure enough, the old teacher came to his sense, and his attitude immediately changed. He said in an equal tone, "Little friend, what do you call him? Is he a teacher or a teacher?" Su Li raised her eyebrows slightly. The old guy seemed to know a lot, but she couldn't ask more now. She could only answer honestly, "It's my teacher." Qi Xianqing didn't ask her to hide it, so she simply said everything to get some information. The old teacher was immediately more shocked. He looked at Su Li back and forth, as if he wanted to see through Su Li's background. Su Li pretended to be confused and asked in a low voice, "Sir, what are you looking at? What is the identity of my teacher? Why are you so shocked?" The old teacher immediately shook his head and said, "Since your teacher didn't tell you, I don't dare to ask. But I shouldn't. Since you have been taught by him, why do you come here?" "Sir, you don't know. This time, it's my family's idea that I come here." Su Li said and sighed faintly. "Master left 2 months ago, and I don't know where he went. It may be a long time before he comes back. I have read all the books he left. It happens that my grandma signed me up to come here, so I want to see how the collection of books is." The old man gave a hollow laugh and said, "I'm afraid to disappoint you. The collection of our Muyang Academy can't be compared with that of Mr. Qi. Qi Tai something, not Miracle Dr. Qi." It seemed that the old man had another identity. Su Li got some news and felt satisfied. She chatted with the old man for a while and then left alone. After Su Li left, the elder frowned. If he let Su Li waste her time here, how could he be worthy of Teacher Qi? "Father, what are you thinking about?" At this time, a woman came in from outside the door. It was Lecturer Ning who had collected admission letters in front of the gate. "Qing, you come at the right time." The old master waved his hand and said, "I saw Su Li today. She is very talented. I couldn't help but call her over to ask her about her master. Who would have thought that she was actually Master Qi's last disciple?" Ning Qing was surprised and said, "Isn't she your junior sister apprentice?" "It shouldn't be. How could Grand Tutor Qi still be alive? You were only 16 years old when you were apprenticed. Grand Tutor Qi was 60 years old. Now it has been more than 60 years. How could anyone live to 120 years old? The old master's face immediately became serious, and he said, Master is a real immortal on earth. How can we measure him? Ning Qing didn't take it seriously. Even if her father had told her 10,000 times that Grand Tutor Qi was a real immortal on earth and the most talented person in the whole Dahan country, she didn't see it with her own eyes. How could she believe it? She always thought that her father admired Qi Xianqing too much and deified him on purpose. Father, you are the headmaster of the Muyang school and the famous Ning Yunji in the Qinghe province. I don't care what you said. Don't spread it out and ruin the reputation of the school. The old master could only sigh in his heart and said nothing. At this moment, Suli walked out of the tea house and immediately got lost. It was the first time for her to come to the Muyang school. After a class, she was called to the tea house by Ning Yunji. She had no time to be familiar with the terrain. Suli, what are you looking for? When Suli was confused, she heard a crisp voice behind her. She looked back and found that it was Mei Ruhan, who was the only one who had passed the test of character C before. It turns out to be you, Mei Ruhan. I can't find the way. Suli smiled sweetly and said in a gentle tone. Mei Ruhan blushed and was shy. Her voice was lower. My maid went to ask for the key of the yard. I will take you there. Then, Mei Ruhan walked in front to lead the way. She looked back at Su Li from time to time. Seeing Su Li's gentle smile, she unconsciously relaxed. They chatted for a while and got closer to each other. By the way, Ruhan, is the condition of the Muyang school so good? He actually gave everyone a side house. Of course not. Mei Ruhan quickly waved her hand and said, if you want to live in a yard, you have to pay extra money. I don't know how much it is per month. Didn't your family tell you? Suli narrowed her eyes and said in a normal tone, no. Let's go and have a look. Mei Ruhan's beautiful eyes flashed a trace of doubt. She was smart and had already thought of something. But with Su Li's talent, the condition of her family should not be too bad. It should be known that ordinary families could not afford to hire a teacher. Soon, they came to a house with blue tiles. Su Li saw at a glance that Su Zipei got a key from the steward in the house. Miss, why are you here? A lively and cute little servant girl in a light yellow dress skipped over to the two of them with the key in her hand. Miss, I've got the key. Let's go. Seeing the little maid's lively appearance, Suli knew that Mei Ruhan must treat her very well at ordinary times. She didn't look like a servant at all. Gua, wait a minute. Let me go in and ask if there is Su Li's key. Mei Ruhan took Gua and was about to go inside. Suli walked in front of her and stopped her. She shook her head in the latter's puzzled eyes. Hey, my dear second sister, why do you come here? Su Zipei walked out of the door with a smile and shook the key in her hand. Her heart was full of resentment. She didn't expect that. Su Li's courage grew after just a few months. She made a fool of herself in the first class and fell into the Gue class, which was only attended by 4 or 5-year-old children. It was a great shame. Su Zipei, who had always bullied Su Li, couldn't bear it. She wanted to retaliate immediately, but when she thought of her grandma's plan, she forcibly suppressed her resentment and pretended that nothing had happened. Mei Ruhan looked at Su Zipei and Su Li in surprise. She only guessed that there was a grudge between them, but she didn't expect that they were sisters. Su Li didn't have the key to the yard, but Su Zipei, who had the worst performance, got it. Were the elders of the Su family stupid? Mei Ruhan looked at Su Zipei with disgust. She took Su Li's hand and said, Su Li, why don't you live with me? The yard is spacious, and it's too lonely for 2 people to live. I can also ask you for advice. Su Zipei was immediately angry, but there were so many people here, so she couldn't lose her temper. She could only suppress her anger and said proudly, Su Area, my mother said that you should live with me. You are not allowed to live in her yard. Mei Ruhan stopped. It turned out that the 2 sisters lived in the same yard. It seemed that she thought too much. She was about to release Su Li's hand, but she heard Su Li's magnetic voice. Sister Ruhan, let's go. What? Mei Ruhan was stunned for a moment, and then she was happy. She took Su Li and ran away. She was extremely obsessed with learning. The teacher, invited by her family, was a little useful at the beginning. Later, she gradually learned more and more, but she couldn't learn anything at all. She had no choice but to come to the Muyang school. She didn't expect that there was such a knowledgeable person among her peers. She naturally wanted to seize the opportunity to learn. Su Zipei foolishly watched Mei Ruhan and the other two leave. She was confused and at a loss. Su Li didn't even listen to her mother. The location of the yard rented by Mei Ruhan was excellent. It was only a few hundred meters away from the school, and the terrain was high. You could see the whole picture of the Muyang school from the second floor. A high wall could be seen in the distance. Mei Ruhan said that the boys' school was on the other side of the wall. Miss Su Li, you don't know that the Muyang school is shady. Gua, the little maid, looked around and stuck out her tongue. She said, the rent of the yard depends on the geographical location. The monthly rent varies from 100 taels to thousands of taels. The location rented by our miss is the best, and it costs 3,000 taels a month. Su Li was surprised. It seemed that Mei Ruhan had a high status in the family. Otherwise, even the merchants would not be willing to pay the rent of 3,000 taels a month. Gua, don't talk so much. Mei Ruhan scolded. She roughly knew Su Li's situation and was afraid to cause Su Li's discomfort. By the way, Su Li, Mei Ruhan hesitated and asked, your sister wants to live in the yard with you. Why don't you go? Mei Ruhan suddenly felt that it was inappropriate. She waved her hand and said, I just asked casually. If you don't want to answer, forget it. It doesn't matter. Su Li smiled lightly and said, if I agree, I will only be waiting for the woodshed. Although I don't care about being poor, I don't want to be uncomfortable. That's it. Mei Ruhan covered her mouth in surprise and said, how can your Su family be like this? If there's a person like you in my family, you will definitely be regarded as the pearl in the palm and be cultivated with all efforts. Don't your parents care about you? Maybe. Who knows? Su Li's answer was ambiguous, which made Mei Ruhan feel more sad. Compared with Su Li, her troubles seemed to be insignificant. Let's not talk about this. I see that you have been curious about the Dictionary of Dahan. I will lend it to you. You can return it to me when I leave. How about that? Really? Su Li, you are so nice. Laughter like silver bells sounded in the yard. It spread into the forest and drifted far away. Su Zipei stood in the yard thousands of meters away from the yard. Looking at the messy weeds, she wanted to put the hoe in her hand directly on Su Li's head. Chapter 67. The Mei family prepared a lot of belongings for Mei Ruhan, including several beddings and sheets. After Gua cleaned up the house for her miss, she also came to help Su Li. The three of them worked together and finally cleaned up the yard before dark. Li, I didn't expect you to work so quickly. After a day, Mei Ruhan called Gua more casually. She wiped the sweat on her face and encouraged herself. It seems that I have to be more independent in the future. Oh, miss. Gua suddenly became anxious. How can you do this kind of dirty and tiring work? Let me do it. I can only do this. If you even learn this, I will be driven out of the Mrs. family. Gua's serious expression immediately made Su Li and Mei Ruhan laugh. Su Li thought that if there was such a quirky little girl beside her, maybe her life would be much more interesting. Hearing their laughter, Gua also giggled foolishly. Suddenly, she remembered something and said to Su Li mysteriously, Miss Su, you don't know. I heard that your younger sister lives in a yard more than 1 mile away from the college. The monthly rent is only 200 taels. If you don't want to be late for class, you have to get up very early to catch up. Su Li was not surprised when she heard that. Zhu Yin doted on Su Zipei very much, but her money was almost spent. She couldn't afford to live in a courtyard with a good location. Maybe Su Zipei begged for this courtyard. In the evening, the three of them had dinner and rested separately. Many things happened during the day, and Mei Ruhan and Guo were very tired. Su Li had an inborn body, so it didn't matter if she didn't sleep for several days and nights. She meditated and breathed all night and woke up on time in the morning. After getting up and washing, she went to the kitchen to cook a pot of corn porridge of suitable thickness. Then she mixed the fillings with local materials and made 3 crispy sesame cakes. With the seasoning she brought, the fragrance of the sesame cakes immediately rose to a whole level. It smells so good. Was stretched and got up. Before she went to the kitchen, she sniffed hard. She couldn't help showing an intoxicated expression. Her soul was almost taken away. Gwa, what did you make for breakfast today? It smells so good. Mei Ruhan walked out of the room without putting on her clothes. Her eyes sparkled like a little glutton. Gwa shook her head and said, Miss, the sky is still dark, and I just got up. How could I make breakfast? I see. Mei Ruhan looked disappointed. It seems that the fragrance came from the yard next door. I didn't expect it to come here. Gwen nodded in agreement. If it were not for the fact that they were not familiar with each other, she really wanted to go next door and ask for some breakfast. Miss, you can sleep a little longer. Gwa is going to make breakfast. As Gwa spoke, she opened the door of the kitchen. Instantly, she was overwhelmed by a stronger fragrance. She stared at the vague figure in the steaming kitchen and screamed out of fear. Ah! Mei Ruhan was scared and rushed out of the room. She grasped Gwa's hand tightly and said in panic, What's wrong, Gwa? Don't scare me. She was only 16 years old, and it was the first time for her to go out. She was already frightened, so she was naturally frightened by Gwa's cry. Gwa grabbed Mei Ruhan's hand and pointed to the kitchen, saying incoherently, Ah, miss, look, it's our kitchen. It's our kitchen. As she spoke, a strand of crystal-clear liquid hung from the corner of her mouth. It smelled so good, I really want to eat it. At this time, Su Li came out of the kitchen. Seeing Mei Ruhan, she was stunned and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She said, Why are you standing here? Mei Ruhan looked over Su Li and wanted to see the scene in the kitchen. She held back her saliva and asked, Li, can you cook? What did you cook? Why does it smell so good? Hearing that, Su Li smiled sweetly and said, I live here. How can I not show my gratitude at all? I happen to know how to cook. Don't blame me for acting on my own. No. Before Mei Ruhan said anything, Gwa shouted, Gwa and Miss are so happy. Gwa has never tasted such a fragrant breakfast in my life. It must be delicious. My young Miss is the most gluttonous. Gwa. Hearing Gwa's words, Mei Ruhan blushed and pretended to be angry. Su Li couldn't help laughing and said hurriedly, Since you are awake, wash up and eat, in case it doesn't taste good when it's cold. When the 2 little girls heard this, they immediately nodded in unison, turned around, and ran back to their rooms. Miss, slow down. I will help you wash up later. No, I can do it myself. Standing in front of the kitchen, Su Li felt strange. This feeling, why did she feel like raising 2 pets? However, the appearance of these 2 girls made her feel a little more at ease, which she had been suppressing for a long time. After a while, Mei Ruhan and Gwa finished washing up. Su Li put the breakfast on the table. 1 sesame seed cake for each of them was just right. After serving corn porridge to them, Gwa stepped aside and secretly swallowed her saliva. Servants had servants' rules. She had to wait for Su Li and Mei Ruhan to finish eating before she went to eat. Seeing that, Mei Ruhan smiled and served another bowl of corn porridge. She snorted and said, Come here. This is not my home. There's so many rules. Hearing that, Gwa was happy, but she still didn't dare to come over. Rules were rules. Su Li was also a miss of the family. Without her permission, how could she dare to sit at the same table? Su Li was stunned, and then shook her head and laughed. She waved her hand to Mei Ruhan's expectant eyes and said softly, Come and sit down. I have never regarded you as a servant, little Gwa. Hearing that, Gwa's eyes became warm and she almost shed tears. Even the young miss didn't say such words to her. Su Li slightly pursed her lips. This situation was very similar, but her situation was different from Gwa's. In the previous life, she was a miss of the Su family, but she couldn't eat at the same table with her parents. No one treated her like Gwa. Gwa sat down and wiped her hands. She picked up the sesame seed cake and took a bite. It made a crisp sound. The shrimp seed filling wrapped in refined salt mixed with the fragrance of coarse grain. It burst on the tip of the tongue and became indescribable sweetness. Mei Ruhan stared at the sesame seed cake in her hand. It looked almost the same as the one sold outside. How could Suli make it so delicious? Guo almost bit her tongue. She had never eaten any delicious food. She didn't even eat much of the ordinary sesame seed cake sold in the town. Eating such delicious food at once, she was so happy that she wanted to cry. God! Oh no! Miss Suli was so kind to her. After taking a bite of the sesame seed cake and drinking a mouthful of the moderately hot corn porridge, Mei Ruhan felt as if all her pores had been opened by this simple breakfast. She woke up from the tiredness in the morning and became full of vigor. Li, the food you make is so delicious. If you can't be a female official in the future, you can definitely make a lot of money by opening a restaurant. Mei Ruhan's eyes were full of little stars of worship. However, I believe that with your talent, it will be easy for you to be an official if you participate in the cultural competition. Suli shook her head and said, "It's not so easy. Don't say it. It's almost time for class. Let's go." Mei Ruhan screamed and found that it was almost 7 o'clock in the morning. She and Suli hurriedly took the books and ran out of the yard, leaving Guo to look after the house. After getting along with Su Li for a day, Mei Ruhan's eyes changed a lot. As long as she was with Su Li, she would feel very at ease. She was 1 year older than Su Li, but why was she more like a child in front of Su Li? Mei Ruhan was amazed in her heart. There was always someone better than her. Compared with Su Li, her excellence seemed to be overshadowed. She had to work harder. The first class in the morning was literature. Su Li and Mei Ruhan separated and came to the gate of Class A. When Ning Yunji saw her, he immediately showed a kind smile and said, "You are here. Hurry up and find a place to sit down." Ning Yunji's performance immediately made many surprised eyes fall on Su Li, but no one asked questions. They restrained their thoughts and resumed to review their lessons. Su Li sat down and took out the Dictionary of Dahan to review. When Ning Yunji saw this scene, he couldn't help but nod slightly. Although the Class A led by him couldn't be compared with Su Li, each of them also stood out after going through many tests. It could be said that every miss from aristocratic family who could sit here was an outstanding woman with good character and appearance. It was not impossible for them to embark on an official career and bring honor to their ancestors in the future. After the morning reading, Ning Yunji began to teach. He was young and had rich experience. Every time he talked about something wonderful, he could always quote from other sources. The students were fascinated. Even Su Li also learned something. When Su Li was listening carefully, Ning Yunji was also observing her secretly. After the class, he appreciated Su Li more. She had such achievements in learning at such a young age, but she was not arrogant or rash. She still worked very hard. Such a temperament couldn't be compared with ordinary people. The master really had a good vision. After the first class, Ning Yunji left directly and didn't talk to Su Li so as not to annoy others. As soon as he left, many classmates immediately came up to inquire about the situation. Su Li dealt with them with ease and then turned away to go to the teacher of the second class, leaving a group of misses secretly praising her. Su Li looked only 15 or 16 years old, but her ability to deal with people was very shrewd. They tried to coax her for a long time, but they didn't get any useful information. Following the information on the wooden sign, Su Li found the classroom of the second class. When she entered the door, she saw dozens of rusted tables. The second class was embroidery. Although a few women in the Dahan country entered the imperial court and a few became generals to fight for the country, most women were still the vassals of men. After they married their husbands, they took the responsibility of supporting their husbands and educating their children. Therefore, the skill of female worker was essential. If a woman could master embroidery well, she could also reduce the economic burden of her husband's family. Su Li glanced at the people present and saw Su Zipei and Mei Ruhan at a glance. The students were divided into different classes, but the embroidery was not affected. At this moment, the people sitting together to listen to the class were still a group of people who entered the school with her. Su Li sat down. After a while, a thin and tall lady came in from the door. The lady had high cheekbones, thin lips, and a pair of thin and long eyebrows. Although her makeup was delicate, she gave people an extremely mean feeling. I am your female morality teacher and embroidery teacher. The woman's voice was as sharp as her appearance. You can call me Lecturer Chui or Mrs. Yang. But, personally, I prefer to hear you call me Mrs. Yang. As she said that, Madame Yang revealed a proud look. Several local misses in the room heard the words, and their faces changed slightly. There was only one famous Yang family in the Muyang town. Lecturer Chui could enter that family. It was really something to be proud of. But such blatant showing off exposed Mrs. Yang's inferiority complex and shallow personality. Could such a vulgar woman really be their teacher? For a moment, many people doubted. Mrs. Yang didn't notice their thoughts. When she saw the faces of those misses changed, she was more complacent. Then she began to teach. Only her voice was left in the class. After a quarter of an hour, the contempt on the faces of many misses disappeared. Mrs. Yang could enter the Muyang school as a lecturer. Her knowledge of embroidery was really admirable. The Han embroidery of the Dahan country was described vividly by her. Although the young ladies of the various families practiced Han embroidery at home, they didn't know much about the system. Mrs. Yang talked about the history of Han embroidery and the techniques of Han embroidery, which made up for their shortcomings. After the brief introduction, most of the class time had passed. Mrs. Yang took a breath. The students thought she would continue, but she changed the topic and asked, Chapter 68. The sudden shout caused the entire room to instantly descend into silence. Many people's gazes swept in unison towards the third seat on the right of the teacher's table. Suli stood up slowly and respectfully. She replied, I'm here. Are you Su Li from the Desa town? Madame Yang looked at Su Li's appearance and figure. A hint of jealousy flashed in her eyes. Then she nodded seriously and said, You do have some capital. It's no wonder that men in the Desa town flock to you as soon as you show up in public. Madame Yang's words were normal, but when others heard it, they immediately misunderstood. Others looked at Su Li with a faint disgust. Even Mei Ruhan felt strange. However, she didn't doubt Su Li. Although they only got along for a day, Su Li's indifferent temperament left a deep impression on her. How could she be the kind of woman that Madame Yang said? Su Li turns out to be that kind of woman who likes to seduce men. We actually become her classmates. It's shameful. Are the people of the Muyang school blind? How can they let this kind of person in? If Madame Yang didn't mention it, we would still be kept in the dark. For a time, there was a lot of discussion in the room, and it gradually became more and more intense. Madame Yang slightly raised the corner of her mouth. It was ridiculous that her aunt gave her so many benefits to deal with such a child. The girl was obviously so angry that she couldn't even speak. If she stimulated the little bitch with a few more words, she would lose her mind and collide with her in the class. Then she could push the boat with the current and directly fulfill her aunt's order. But at this moment, Su Li's clear voice sounded and completely overwhelmed other people's voices. Lecturer Chui, I don't know why you insult my innocence. I am from the Desu town, and Lecturer Chui is from the Muyang town. Does Lecturer Chui convict me only based on her slander? In my opinion, it's too stupid. Su Li's tone was very calm, and she argued for what was right. She didn't have any awareness of being involved in the situation. Such a cold reply also woke up many of the young ladies who had been bewitched. Su Li is right. Madame Yang is from the Muyang town, which is far away from the Desa town. How could she know what happened in the Desa town? That's too much. Isn't he afraid of being slandered by just hearing it and talking about it openly? Madame Yang is too careless. This kind of behavior is really hard to believe. In an instant, the direction of the wind changed. Madame Yang heard the discussion below the stage, and her face suddenly became a little ugly. Su Li seemed to be not as easy to deal with as she thought, and she just called her Lecturer Chui 3 times? This was a blatant provocation. Mrs. Yang laughed coldly in her heart. Very good. There was still a long way to go. She had enough patience to find the girl's weakness, and then she would be able to find the right remedy. Thinking of this, Madame Yang looked a little relaxed and said lightly, "Su Li, what you said is reasonable. I'm being rude. Sit down." Su Zipei, who was watching the show, was dumbfounded. Why did her aunt suddenly give in when she had the upper hand? She wanted to see her aunt help her vent her anger. Su Li sat down and frowned secretly. Madame Yang was malicious to her. It was 80% that ma'am. Su Chui made trouble for her. She took the opportunity to make trouble for her. Although she coped with it, her forbearance was somewhat beyond her expectation. This is troublesome. The second half of the class passed peacefully, but Mei Ruhan always felt that there were dark waves under the calm surface, which made her unconsciously frightened. After the class, Mei Ruhan took Su Li back to the yard and couldn't help but snort. "Madame Yang doesn't seem to be a good person. She slandered you as soon as she came up. Have you ever offended her before?" Su Li shook her head and smiled bitterly. "I don't know, but in order not to get you into trouble, I'd better move away." "Don't go." Mei Ruhan suddenly became angry and took Su Li's hand angrily. "You can live here peacefully. I'm not afraid of Monkey Yang at all. I also want to eat the dishes you cook." "Monkey Yang?" Su Li was surprised and then chuckled. "Now that you mention it, I really think that Madame Yang looks like a monkey." She didn't mention the matter of moving away anymore. With the power in her hands now, it was more than enough to protect Mei Ruhan. "Ha, right? I have long wanted to say that." Mei Ruhan also laughed happily, but came out with a puzzled look and looked at the two. What kind of monkey could make the two misses laugh like this? After the morning class on the third day, the first class was embroidery. Su Li sat quietly in her seat and saw Ma'am Yang Shui soon. "Today, ma'am." Yang Shui wore long dress. Her whole body was covered with unrestrained and enthusiastic patterns, which had a unique, exotic style. This kind of pattern could hardly be seen in Han country. "Today, I will teach you the most characteristic needlework of Han embroidery. You must have learned the basic needlework at home. I will skip it and teach you what you want to learn most." "Ma'am." Yang Shui looked as usual, but Su Li still saw that she glanced at her quietly several times. "First of all, embroider the cloud pattern of Han embroidery as wide as one finger." As soon as she finished speaking, everyone immediately opened the needlework box at the table. When Su Li was about to open it, she suddenly raised her head and met Madame Yang's expectant eyes. She immediately stopped what she was doing. Madame Yang was ashamed and annoyed because of being seen. She immediately walked to Su Li and scolded. "What are you doing? Why are you so slow? Don't you start? Don't you even know the basic needlework? If that's the case, then why are you still sitting here? Get out of here." Su Li pursed her lips and reached out to open the needlework box quickly. "Ma'am." Yang Shui immediately stepped aside as a conditioned reflex, but she didn't hear Su Li's panic cry for a long time. What happened? She looked back in astonishment and saw that Su Li was safe and sound. She was taking out a needle from the box. Was the mechanism broken? At this time, Su Li slowly stood up with a shy face and said in a low voice, "Madame Yang, I have to go to the toilet. Can I leave for a while?" Madame Yang snorted and said, "Go. Come back quickly." Su Li immediately left the room as if she had been granted amnesty. Madame Yang saw her go out of the room, and her doubts immediately appeared on her face. She pretended to walk to Su Li's table naturally and gently picked up the needlework box. Before she reached out to open it, she saw that the lid of the box suddenly popped up. An earth-shattering scream pierced through the shabby room. Su Li, who had walked far away, heard it clearly. She couldn't help but smile. Estimating the time, Su Li returned to the room but didn't see Ma'am Yang Shui. She didn't look for it. She sat down quietly and opened the needlework box again. Then she threaded the needle and began to embroider the cloud pattern. At her age in the previous life, she didn't even hold the embroidery needle. Later, after she married her disabled husband, she went to the embroidery workshop as an apprentice in order to make a living for her family. She did the chores for free in the embroidery workshop. Of course, the embroidery workshop was very happy. Her disabled husband was very weak. In order to buy better medicinal materials to stew medicine for him, she almost didn't sleep. She practiced embroidery every day and her hands were full of needle marks. After 2 months, she made up for her lack of talent with diligence. Her embroidery skills were not worse than those of the embroidery artificers in the workshop. Her diligence was appreciated by the workshop owner. She learned the unique stitch method of Han embroidery from the workshop owner, string flower stitch. It didn't take long for her to complete a flower feast. With this picture, she became the top embroidery artificer in the workshop. Her poor life was greatly improved, and she had more time to accompany her disabled husband. Thinking of the past, Suli smiled gently. She unconsciously sped up her hands and fluttered on the embroidery board like a butterfly. In a short time, there was a long cloud pattern on the blank cloth, like the clouds floating in the sky. It was extremely flexible. "Ma'am." Yang Shui wiped the water on her face angrily. She did something in the needlework box. As long as Suli opened it, she would be sprayed with black ink immediately and make a fool of herself on the spot. But she didn't expect that it didn't matter if Suli opened it. She just picked it up and the mechanism opened automatically. She was so unlucky. The cold wind blew into the room. "Ma'am." Yang Shui couldn't help but shake her neck. She just washed her face with a lot of cold water. It was really uncomfortable. "Counting the time, ma'am." Yang Shui had no time to change her clothes inside. She could only change her coat and hurry back to the classroom. As soon as Madame Yang appeared, everyone immediately looked up. They all saw the miserable situation of the teacher just now. Some of them even couldn't help laughing. "Fortunately, ma'am," Yang Shui screamed and rushed out at that time, so they didn't see who was laughing. Otherwise, they would definitely settle accounts later. Stepping into the room, Madame Yang's cold eyes swept across the classroom. Everyone hurriedly lowered their heads. Only Su Li still sat upright and didn't flinch at all. Seeing Su Li's stubborn appearance, Madame Yang suddenly felt angry. She walked quickly to Su Li and scolded. "Who allowed you to leave the classroom at will? If the cloud pattern is not finished, everyone will be." Halfway through her words, Madame Yang was like a duck whose throat was choked. She stared at Su Li's embroidery board blankly. Even her eyeballs almost popped out. What she saw was the cloud pattern that was 1 foot long. Su Li embroidered so much in just a quarter of an hour. Only the top embroidery artificer of the embroidery workshop could have this kind of speed. How old was Su Li? How could she do it? She must have cheated. Thinking of this, Madame Yang immediately confirmed that she guessed right. She sneered and screamed, "Su Li, stand up." Su Li put down the embroidery needle and stood up. She still looked calm. "What's wrong?" "Lecturer Chui, do you want to hear hearsay again this time?" As soon as she said this, there was a burst of slight laughter in the room. Madame Yang's face instantly turned red. She was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. She pointed at the cloud pattern with her fingertips and almost broke the embroidery board. Embroidering 1 foot long cloud pattern in just a quarter of an hour. Do you think that your embroidery skill is comparable to that of the top embroidery artificer? If you want to cheat, do it secretly. Don't think that everyone is as stupid as you. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.